Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Planning Commission meeting, October 23rd, 2019. It is 6:32. First, I'd like to call to order quorum. Mr. Mattson?
Here.
Mr. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Poselli?
Here.
Secretary Lukowitz?
Here.
Vice Chair Kalunian?
Here.
Chairman Flynn is here. We have two excused tonight, Mr. Ozenkowski and Mr. Kenny. So we will please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, emergency exits. Behind you, there's doors leading out into the hallway. Goes out to your left and your right. And behind us, you can go out this way through the offices, out onto the east exit. We have approval of minutes. We'll do them one at a time. September 4th.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion for Mr. Mattson. Do I get a second? Mrs. Lukowitz, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. September 25th, approval of minutes.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Mattson. Do I hear a second?
I second.
Ms. Lukowitz seconds the motion. Any discussion on the September 25th minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? Okay, motion carries. October 5th, we had a site walk. Can I have a motion on those minutes, please?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion by Mr. Kalunian and a second by Mr. Mattson. Any discussion?
Mr. Anderson.
Oh, Mr. Anderson, sorry. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Chair says aye. None opposed. Motion carries. Okay, we have some calendar dates. Anybody have any conflicting problems on the calendar dates for 2020? All right, hearing none. I get a motion on acceptance of the calendar dates for 2020.
Motion to approve calendar dates.
Okay, motion by Mr. Mattson. I have a second.
I second.
Second by Mr. Poselli. Okay, the motion carries on the calendar dates. I'd like to move on the agenda. This is on the
Mr.
agenda
Chair.
is 8-2.
I'm not seeing the solicitor present yet, so why don't you just proceed with,
Oh, you want me to proceed in this
Yeah.
order? Okay. Okay, I have a ratification of a decision on Crompton Meadows. Do I have a motion on the ratification on Crompton Meadows?
Motion to approve the ratification for Motion to approve the ratification for Crompton Meadows.
I have a second on that.
Second it.
I have a motion by Mr. Kaluni and a second by Mr. Poselli. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None heard. Motion carries on Crompton Meadows. Okay, I have a pre-application for Tallwood Estates. Is anybody here representing the applicant? Mr. Cronin?
Hey, Mr. Flynn, Thomas Cronin, Nolan Bernero Cronin, Ferrara.
Can't hear it, Tom.
My apologies. Thomas Cronin, Nolan Bernero Cronin, Ferrara, 1070 Main Street in Coventry for the applicant. So we're here again on pre-application. This is AP 50, lots 11 and 23, 46 acres with frontage on Johnson's Pond to the north and Wood Estates north to the south, ironically. It's an R20 zone. The lots will be merged. It's currently a vacant woodland with one house on lot 23. We're proposing 62 condominium units, 2-bedroom units, with a main access point on Riegelwood and emergency access on Tallwoods, controlled by a gate. The OWTS would be by building, public water from Kent County, natural gas and utilities available from Riegelwood. It has a 25 24-foot wide private road loop through the project. As a result of the development, it'll leave 23 acres of open space. So we went on a site walk, take a look at the property. The board is aware that 62 single-family houses would fit on the property, not leaving any open space. That is not how we would prefer to proceed. We would prefer to proceed with the condominiums, but I'm here to gather the board's impression after the site walk.
Anybody have anything to add at the tours at the sidewalk? One thing, I make a comment, it's a beautiful piece of property. I think there's a lot of open space for instead of putting a conventional 62 lot. I do have some, did you read the DPW's report?
I
You had
did.
some concerns?
Yeah.
You don't have any issues with that?
None. Those were mainly to do with the access points and what those
Right.
would look like sidewalks. Make sure we're talking about the same thing, but
Yes.
if that's what we're talking about, then no problems with any of that.
Okay. I don't have any other questions. You have anybody else? on the board?
As just for edification, I know I don't always check the back of the room. Are both plans available for the public? There might be public here to understand what the impacts would have been if we had gone with the conventional.
No,
Because I
because
know-
it wasn't a public hearing, so since it wasn't a public
Okay.
hearing, I didn't
All right.
take any plans out,
Okay.
but I mean, I can show the other plan right there for them to see.
Right, so that would be a regular conventional neighborhood with your typical 3-4 bedroom homes,
Correct,
2-car
mimicking
garages.
Wood Estates
Right.
North, so to speak.
And as you can see from the other plan, I think we preserve quite a bit of the woodlands by putting in the smaller condominium-style, single-family homes on the property.
And much more of a buffer
Yeah.
also.
And I think, and did you say some of these are all 2-bedroom, Mr. Cronin?
They are 2-bedroom condominiums.
All right, thank you.
So I would assume it'd be less of an impact to the school system than a conventional development of 62 homes, 3 to 4 beds.
That's what the Housing and Urban Development, Department of Housing and Urban Development says on a statistical basis, so.
But it's not over 55.
It is not currently being built as an over 55.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions?
No, we're just sticking with the one access, and the other one was gonna be emergency access.
That's right, the primary access on Riegelwood, which you can see at the 4-way stop at the bottom of the display there, and then an emergency gated access on Tallwoods on the lower right-hand corner of the property.
And no plans to, you had that little jut out onto Sharon Drive, no plans to do anything with that.
There's no plans currently to do anything with that.
Mr. Anderson, I don't know if, when on the site walk, I did bring up there'd be a possibility, because Sharon Drive is a dead end now. If there was ever an emergency on Sharon Drive, it may be convenient for someone to be able to access this subdivision to exit. I'm not suggesting it be open all the time, or be even paved for that matter, but just in case police emergency vehicles, because if you're at Sharon Drive, like on 4th of July or any of that, you get trapped down there, there's no other way out. So I know I brought that up. So I just kind of want to leave that on the table for now. I'm not saying it has to be built.
Maybe a breakaway gate there too, access.
I'm not sure of the grades. I don't know if
Emergency
it'll
only.
work, but that 50-foot wide parcel may have some benefit.
And I recall the dialogue, and I was just figuring more on just a permanent road, which isn't in the plans.
It is not in the
Right.
plans.
Okay, Mr. Cronin,
So we can, there's no appetite from the board to go with the conventional plan, and we should proceed with the condominium plan at master plan.
that's my liking, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Cronin.
Mr. Chair. You could hear that. 8.2.
Okay. Okay, could I'm gonna move Tallwood from 8.2 to, I guess it would be 6.2.
It's whitetail.
Whitetail,
8.2,
yep.
to the front of the
8.2.
agenda.
Hi.
Good evening. Thank you for indulging me this evening. I appreciate it. Attorney Nicole Martucci of KSRP Law in Providence, Rhode Island, on behalf of the applicant. Before the board this evening is a request for a one-year extension of final plan approval pursuant to Rhode Island General Laws 45-23-43. Final plan approval was approved for this project in November of 2018. And pursuant to state statute, the developer is entitled by right to a one-year extension of that final plan approval by way of applying to this board, which is why I'm here this evening. The first two phases of the project are complete, so it's just the third phase, which we expect to be completed very soon, but out of an abundance of caution, given the one-year timeline coming up, we're just looking to exercise that right for the one-year extension.
Anybody have any questions for the applicant? Okay, I'll take a motion to extend the final plan approval of Whitetail Estates 30-lot residential cluster subdivision, Ironwood, Land Company, AP 76, Lot 1, 20 Luba Road, Ironwood Drive.
Motion to approve the extension.
I have a motion by Mr. Colonian. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion by the board? Hearing none. Can I have a vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Chairman says aye. None against? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Somebody make a motion for that?
Would you like to explain this?
Well,
Okay. We have recommendations to town council. I have a recommendation to the town council of amendment to Article 10 of Coventry zoning ordinance, earth removal / sand and gravel extraction, referred to planning commission by town clerk for review and recommendation as provided in RIGL number 45-24-27.
thank you, Mr. Chair. This one here, this was presented, I believe, from the solicitor's office. They appeared to be for the council. They discussed this before the council, and the council has referred this to the planning commission for a recommendation. What you have is Article 10, which is the earth removal, sand and gravel extraction, lays out all the guidelines for anyone wishing to operate a gravel pit in the town. And the way the current ordinance reads is, in addition to a special use permit from the zoning board, you need town council approval. So you need to go before the council and you need to go before the zoning board. The solicitor felt that there was nothing in the Enabling Act or the town charter that gave the town council the authority to sit and hear that application for a zoning, for a gravel operation. So basically what the solicitor did was he removed everything from the Article 10 that referenced appearing before the zoning, the town council for their approval. So in order to get a gravel pit operation in town, you would strictly have to go for the special use permit before the zoning board. Dave, was there anything you wanted to offer on that?
No, and that was always part of the process. So we actually look at it as not only are we clearing up a jurisdictional problem, we're also making it more streamlined, we think, because you always had to go to the zoning board for a special use permit in addition to the town council. So,
Right. So you'd just be recommending to them to eliminate the town council from the approval process, and then they would ultimately have to vote on it, so.
Okay. Does anybody on the board have any questions?
I do. Do you think there was any history? I mean, what was the purpose of that? Do you have? I mean, my gut tells me there may have been 1 or 2 gravel operations in town that were problematic, and they felt that the town council wanted to weigh in, maybe put some stipulations on what was taking place, or perhaps I could be way off on that. I'm just curious. Nothing.
I don't know. I was not given any background on where this came from.
it dates back to 1991. So it predates a lot of individuals. I think probably your your guess is correct. But it really, it belongs with the zoning board. It has been with the zoning board in the sense that a special use permit is required. And, you know, from a land use perspective, it really does make sense that the zoning board of review, which monitors land use, is the sole body responsible for citing these particular uses.
And as with other special use permits, it would still come here for a recommendation.
That was going to be my next point, Mr. Clunian. Even though the town council would be bowing out of the picture, the planning commission would still be in the picture, giving an advisory opinion to the zoning board on the special use permit.
That's correct.
Okay.
So, and if you look at the gravel ordinance in town, I believe the only place it's allowed in is the I-1 zone.
Yeah.
There's not a ton of industrial property in town. So I don't see a lot of people applying for gravel pit operations in town, so.
So would this apply, for example, to the, and again, I don't know if it's ongoing or not, Calvintown Road, Center of New England, any of those places? Is there any gravel extraction that takes place up in those areas? I mean, those aren't zoned I-1.
No, they're not. They're zone BP, and I'm not aware of any gravel operations at Center of New England. I don't believe there's any ongoing at Center of New England.
Cardi, all those ones all closed? Just curious.
I have not seen any extraction over there in a few years.
Yeah.
But it was my understanding when I did speak with the solicitor about this, those existing ones probably have special use permits already in place.
That's correct,
possible.
yeah.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Didn't think
Yep.
of that.
And there's a provision in the recommended change that addresses those, what we would refer to as pre-existing, non-conforming, existing operations.
Anybody else? Okay, I'll entertain a motion for a recommendation to the council.
Mr. Anderson, want to take a shot? Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the changes to the zoning the ordinance for earth and removal and gravel extraction.
Okay, I have a motion from Mr. Anderson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
I have a second from Mr. Colonian. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. None opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep. Okay, next we have a recommendation to the town council of a proposed zone change for the old Flat River Middle School across the street. Proposed zone change from RR2 to Industrial 1, AP 59, Lot 13, Zone RR2. That's 1675 Flat River Road. Could you,
I will, Mr. Chair.
explanation? Thank you.
Okay, what we have here, again, this was referred to us by the town council. There has been a suggestion, currently, the property across the street, there's been a school there since 1954. The land is zoned residential RR2. And now that the school is no longer there, it's currently being used by the town as municipal offices for both the town and the school department. Across the street, is the town hall. All the town hall property, the property to the left and to the right, they're all zoned I-1. You can see in the purple area right here, here's town hall right here. Here's the property in question across the street, the school facility. All these lots right here, they're all zoned I-1 industrial. So what they wanted to do was, there was a request made to change the zoning on the property across the street from an RR2 to an industrial 1 zone to more mimic what the town properties were across the street. So I don't consider this spot zoning because there is industrial right across the street. There really is no room for expansion on this property. The back of that parcel is all wetlands back there. The other And the other thing that was trying to be cleaned up, the school buses as an example, that have been there since the Wood Street School. School buses are not allowed to be parked and stored in a residential zone. So we're trying to clean that up too. That'll be, it's allowed in an industrial 1 zone. So we're trying to just clean it up and make it a little neater. And again, this is just a recommendation. The council would be the ultimate, whether they wanted to approve the zone change or not. So that's where we're at with this one.
Any questions from the board on this? All right, hearing none, I'll call for a motion for recommendation to the town council.
Right, I'll make a favorable recommendation to the town council for the proposed change for Old Flat River Road Middle School from RR2 to I1, AP 59, Lot 13, Zone RR2, 1675 Flat River Road.
Okay, motion by Mr. Mattson. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Pacelli, second it. Any discussion?
Once this is changed, is there any way to put a reverter back if the town decides to do something different with the property? I mean, I'm really not.
That's an excellent question, sir.
If I live next door to this property, I don't know, I understand the town was in a jam when the buses ended up there. They started the construction of the police station. They needed a place to park the buses. It's my understanding until they went to put a propane filling station in, this wouldn't have even come forward.
Sure, let me just, a couple things, Mr. Clinton. This land right here, that's an 8-unit apartment building, which multifamily provides a good buffer between single-family and an industrial zone. So you already have 8 apartments back here. This is open space, owned by the town as part of the Walker Ridge, or Walker Farm. This also is open space. There is a single-family residential here, and this also is a single-family residential. I don't know legally if you can do that. I personally would not have a problem with the reverter clause because you bring up a good point. And I'll just expand on your point. There is a lot of uses that if the town was ever to sell this in 50 years, an industrial 1 zone does allow some uses that might not be amenable to the neighborhood.
Or the town hall across the street. And all due respect, multifamily next to industrial, we saw that at the asphalt plant in Reservoir Road. It is not a buffer that I would want. So, I mean, granted, it's a multifamily dwelling. I'm just raising the issue. I feel those buses could have been parked somewhere else. Quite honestly, they were put there to save money because no one wanted to pay the displacement from Wood Street. There were offers out there to move those up to Reservoir Road across from the high school in the industrial zone, and it would have cost money. And that's really why they're there. And now they came up with propane to fill the buses, which was another cost-saving issue, and now they can't fill them across the street at our propane station. So now the next step's going to be to get a special use permit to put a propane filling station there. So I'm just, for the record, I'm opposed to it.
And I also do believe that was all outlined in my staff report.
It was.
Okay.
So I'll just leave it at that. I just wanted to air that because I probably will not be voting in favor of this.
Well, could we try to get an answer to your question, sir?
Yeah, can you?
From the solicitor, as far as to the reverter clause that you were asking about?
If the motion is amended, I may reconsider. But again, I just like a resident in town, zoning recommendations are not supposed to be because of a financial benefit to the property owner, and quite frankly, that's what the town's done. That's just my opinion.
I'm hesitant to weigh in on the reverter because I would have to look at that, and the reason being is that there are a number of notice requirements attendant with any zoning change. So while I think the council can put certain conditions on a zone change, I don't think one of them could be reverter because that could provide notice issues to someone in the future. I'm not, but I would like to, because this is just a recommendation, I think the real answer lies with the council. And I am passing the buck a little bit, to be honest with you.
That's fine.
My concern is with the notice issues, because in a zone change, there has to be notice to all involved people, and a reverter, I don't know that satisfies a notice
Let
requirement.
me ask this question. If it wasn't for the buses, would we still be in this predicament? I realize that may have been the catalyst for the question, but is the school department offices and the offices that are here allowed in a rural residential zone? The fact that the school was there and probably may predate the zoning, that's an allowable use? It's only the buses that are not the allowable use? Or is there a host of other activities that are taking place that, quite frankly, are not an allowable use?
I'm gonna,
Let me take that, because I think really one of the concerns, and you raised the issue of the buses and those type of things. One of the other I think one of the other reasons behind this is actually to achieve uniformity, because the annex building is used and will, in the foreseeable future, continue to be used for both school and municipal uses, different from the school use that was intended and had been the case since 1954. As the director pointed out, where we sit, these are all industrial, zone industrial, and it allows for certain uses like what we have in the DPW facility and whatnot, certainly. But I think one of the things is also to be consistent with municipal use, to allow for other uses, but it's also consistent to have it across the street and here. So,
And is recreational activities are allowed in the industrial zone?
what is allowed in the industrial zone is government municipal functions, okay? It's allowed in industrial zone per the zoning ordinance, and it's right in the category. So, in my opinion, the Department of Parks and Recreation would fall under government municipal operations. So therefore, they would be allowed in the industrial zone. Do you agree?
I agree with that, yep.
So the special use permit, so if the zone change is granted, the bus parking is not an issue, and then the only issue would be they would issue a special use permit, for example, for the propane.
Well, I'm not saying they'd issued it, they'd need to
If
request
they
one.
need to request one. So that, it would, automatically, the buses would be allowed. And any, in the other
Correct.
activity, right. So if someone went forward and obtained a special use permit for propane filling and the buses were parked there, and then let's say the government ceased their operations and then shortly thereafter another company came and bought the property and wanted to continue, would they need another special use permit for that propane?
I don't believe so, because I believe it goes with the use.
'Cause would that be something that, and I realize that I'm jumping ahead a little
You
bit.
couldn't operate a public fueling station if that's where you're going with it, you know.
No, another business that needed a propane filling station, let's say they had heavy trucks, let's just say Suburban Propane decided to expand, come down the street and decide to move their operation into that building later because the town wasn't using it to park buses anymore. Would that be allowable?
If they had to do an expansion of the tanks, I don't believe that one
Yeah.
3,500 gallon propane tank would suffice for.
So in other
That
words,
type of operation.
limitations or restrictions could be put on the special use permit that would perhaps protect the neighbors.
Oh, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Without question. And, Mr. Colonian, if I may, you asked, in the existing RR2 zone, government-owned buildings, with the exception of a garage or utility, is allowed by special use permit. A garage or utility in a government-owned building is a special use permit. A fire or police station and a municipal school is permitted as of right.
So everything's allowable there now except for the buses.
Correct.
Okay.
Anybody else on the board have any questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion on the recommendation.
I believe
to
you
the
have a
council.
motion.
Okay. Okay, we're in discussion. Anybody else?
No, they didn't, they suggested we don't add.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
One opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next on the agenda, we have 8.1. It's under new business for discussion and/or action. We have a pre-application site walk for Murphy's Flat. Anybody here representing the applicant? Come on up, sir.
Good evening, Chair, members of the board. I'm Joe Murphy. I'm the owner. I currently reside at 100 Brookwood Road in Wakefield, Rhode Island. Although I am a native Coventry person and went to that middle school. So I'm here in front of you for, I guess, a pre-app or right now to schedule a site visit for a proposed multi-unit building on 59 Clock Mill Road.
Would you like to just give us a brief?
What my proposal is? Sure.
Yeah, just briefly before we schedule the site
Okay.
walk.
The land actually has been in my family for a long time, since slightly after World War II. My parents previously owned it. I own a neighboring property at 61 Clock Mill Road, and this piece of land was provided to me from my parents. I've had this piece of land now for a little while. It's a vacant piece of land. My intention was always to develop it. When Pursuant put in the development, they left a right-of-way for utilities to, with the intention that this lot would eventually be developed. With the water line which went in on Clock Mill Road, they also put a curb stop for this piece of property. So there was always the intention to develop this piece of property. The neighboring property I have is a two-family, which I came in front of the zoning probably 30-something years ago to get. And I've owned that property for that period of time. And I intend on owning both pieces of property for a long period of time. I would like to develop it. Over the last couple of years, last year I retired, and this piece of property, it's unfortunately, instead of helping me out right now, it's costing me money every year in taxes. So I need to do something with it. I looked at various options. One of the options was potentially build a single family or maybe a duplex. And truthfully, it doesn't work. The numbers just don't work. So my proposal initially was a four-family. I think with very relatively small apartments, probably around 800 square feet each. That would give me a house size around 3,300, which I think I could actually make look like a single-family house. So that's one option. The other option would, I spent a lot of time going through the town's comprehensive plan. The other option is to have an affordable housing element to it. To do that, to make it work, it would have to be a 6-unit. 2 of the units would be the affordable housing, and then the other 4 would be conventional. So that's what my plan is. I'm kind of interested to hear from the board what their preference would be, whether it be a 4-unit or maybe have a couple units that are affordable for the town, which seems to be pretty needed. I am a member of the South Kingstown Planning Board, and I'm also on the Affordable Housing Commission in South Kingstown, so pretty familiar with the processes and the advantages and disadvantages.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
You pretty much stuck to that side of the property. The other side's not developable. I mean, I saw the stream on the plan. There's some wetlands over there.
There's considerable wetlands on it. It's about 3.6 acres. About half of that is wetlands. So land suitable for development is probably about 1.8 or so, and I'm including the buffer as land suitable for development. But that other side, most of it's either wet or a buffer, but really would be inaccessible. And that particular area, and I'm going back to when Pursuant originally was doing their design, that particular area has probably the best water tables of that whole subdivision. That has about 4.5 to 5 feet. So it's very, very good for the proposed use. And it also has the access from the back corner, if you can, to Timber.
Right,
was it
I saw
Timber
that.
Lane?
Yeah, I just wanted to verify that basically everything to the right isn't really suitable for another building, or you couldn't break up the one building proposal into 2 separate buildings. Couldn't get 2 duplexes in there.
If I did two duplexes there, they would have to go essentially, both buildings would have to go essentially in the location of the one. Now, could I actually divide the lot with some configuration and have two separate lots with both duplexes there? Maybe, I don't know.
Okay. Right, so just trying to get it, we'll see what happens on
yeah.
the sidewalk.
And again, my interest is to try to minimize the presence. I own the house right in front of it.
Okay, why don't we schedule a site walk?
That sounds good. What's your preference?
Yep, site walk will be scheduled for the 26th,
What day is that?
Saturday,
Saturday?
yep, at 9 o'clock.
We have a rain date?
Rain date would be,
That's his phone.
yeah,
The following Saturday?
rain date would be the 2nd of November.
Again at 9 o'clock? Again at 9 o'clock? Okay. Thank you.
Okay,
I'll
thank
see
you.
then. I assume we'll meet right out at Clock Mill Road at the entrance to the,
Yeah, right on Clock Road would be good.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, I have 8.3 preliminary plan for Highland Ledges. Sarah Turcone Partnership proposed 4-lot residential subdivision on an unapproved ledge road, AP 317, lot 73.1, zone RR3. And go ahead, Mr. Cronin.
Mr. Chairman, Thomas Cronin, Nolan Bernero, Cronin Farrar, same address, 1070 Main Street, Coventry, Rhode Island. So we're here for a minor subdivision. It's a preliminary application, plat 317, lot 73.1, zoned RR3. It's vacant land with the exception of one foundation. The board may recall that I appeared before them on this piece of property once before for a single home to be approved on a gravel road standard in October of 2018, and that foundation has been installed, as you probably observed on the site walk. This is a piece of property just shy of 17 acres. The ledge road is a gravel public road, and through some quirk, lot 73.1 is divided in half by ledge road as it runs from off of Flat River Road up Route 117. The proposal is to put 2 lots on each side of ledge road, fronting on ledge road. All the lots are a minimum of 3 acres and otherwise meet the zoning requirements for an RR3 zone. No variances are required. The wells will be private and there'll be a private OWTS for each lot. The road, as I appear before you on Ledge Road, the road is the road. It's the issue, right? So the town has made some requests, which we have been working with them on. We had proposed dedicating 20 feet from the center line on each side as a right-of-way for the road. The town has requested 50 feet for the right-of-way, so it'd be 25 feet from the center line on either side. As the road continues to the south, we run into some other private property. So we can't give 50 feet, a 50-foot right-of-way. Some of that land is not ours, right? So it's 25 feet from the center line on property that we own would be the right-of-way. Most of the road along our property would be improved to a 24-foot gravel road. The exception to that is just to the north of the property. There's a wetland that has a 50-foot wetland buffer, which encompasses the road. So although the right-of-way would be 25 feet from the center line of the road there, we would not be able to expand that road to 24 feet. It's currently about 20 feet. It would be improved within its existing boundaries so as not to interfere with the wetland. So these are the agreements that we've kind of come to with the town with regard to how we would approach that. Otherwise, 4 single-family houses, similar to what's there. The driveways each would come out on Ledge Road, and the traffic would proceed as it does now out to Flat River Road. So Mr. Crossman has put up the proposed development. You can see to the west that wetland, or really the buffer seems more significant than the wetland in this particular case, but the wetland and its buffer run along that western portion of the property, as well as the northern boundary line, and that kind of dedicates where the homes would go. So that's the proposal. We did have a site walk. We went out there, you saw that in cooperation with the town, my client has widened the road in the time putting in the foundation, so you get an idea what that would look like. That's it, there's nothing really, well, when we do put in when the houses actually go in, we'll have to do some drainage work, some septic work and things like that. Those would be, in this particular case, building permit issues, because it's a minor subdivision.
What I can say is every portion of the road that has been developed, the road has gotten much better. It's very tough at the beginning of the road, but the developer has no control over that. When we did talk to him on the sidewalk, he is improving the front of where the houses are going. I think that's a benefit for that street. I see the director's report. You can only, I'm the director of DPW. I know you can only do so much. You can't go across on people's land, private land, but I think talking to the developer, he's gonna do as much as he possibly can to improve that street. So any other questions from the board on this?
What did we stipulate for the other, there were other properties that came here, so they ended up with, what was the road width?
Yeah,
24?
It was
20?
It was a 20-foot road with 4 feet on each side. In addition, and that was the first house. And then when we did Sarah Turcone, we expanded that a little bit to 10 feet from the roadway. But this is at the recommendation of the planner. We're creating an actual right of way here, so that the property lines are not the center line of the road. The property lines will be pushed back, and we'll have an actual right of way.
So is the problem when you got past the last property that you're developing, or is it the parcel across the street?
Can I approach the board? Would that be okay?
Sure, yeah.
Absolutely.
That might be
Go ahead.
I have a loud voice. I don't know. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
So, two things. This is a private residence, privately owned.
Right,
Not ours. So we can expand the road this way.
right.
It's not a problem right away. I mean, the right of way and the road. You can't really do anything on this side. And they have a planning board decision that says significantly less as far as the right of way. But it is what it is.
So what will it end up at? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Be 25, the right of way be 25 on this side, and probably more like, let's see, 10, 14 on that side, total of 40.
Okay.
And then, Mr. Crossman, I have once again irritated.
Change the color.
Not just a smart board.
So, and then Mr. Clooney, just as long as I'm here, this is the holy smokes.
All right.
Right here is the wetland buffer. This portion of the road,
Oh, you can't touch that.
right, can't touch it. The town can't touch it, we can't touch it. But it's about 20 feet wide.
You could dedicate it though, right?
Well, we're gonna provide the right of way.
Okay, but it'd be up to town to permit it.
Yeah, and we'll take care of the road that's there, but we cannot expand it.
Gotcha. So the town will have adequate width, even if it's only 39 feet in some cases, from the lowest property all the way to the top of what's shown on that plan. 39 feet minimum.
Minimum, and
Up,
that
and it's-
would be, well, I wouldn't say that, Mr. Clooney, because I don't think it appears on this plan, but I'm afraid of this.
Yeah, don't touch it. That's all right.
There's another single-family house there.
No, I just meant from the most southerly property on westerly, whatever it is that your client owns.
Approximately 40 here, expanding to 50 for the
Right,
right of way.
okay. That's fine. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair. Can I have permission to?
Absolutely.
I believe there's some waivers you need to ask for. There was, as part of the preliminary approval, I didn't get a letter from, so I'm recommending conditional plan approval based on getting these documents. Do you have a letter from the Western Coventry Fire District?
No, it's been requested, but.
I
not
understand, but you
yet.
don't have that.
That's
So
right.
that would be a conditional approval upon you getting that, as
Agreed.
well as you don't have a soil erosion permit
Right,
in hand?
I did mention that we would ask to do that at building permit stage.
Correct, but you have to ask for the waiver. That's why I'm bringing this up at this
Thank you.
point.
Thank
And
you.
the other one would be so you would ask for a waiver on the letter from the fire district, the soil erosion sedimentation permit be pushed over to the building permit stage, as well as your OWDS being approved prior to the issuance of a building permit.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I adopt Mr. Crossman's request. The, and, you know, the road, as Mr. Pacelli indicated, Mr. McGee asked for the whole enchilada that we can't provide, so the road would be as I've described, limited to our abilities.
And I think every other lot that was developed on that street, basically, we've been consistent with. You've done what you can do with what you have.
Yes.
But it's much better, the road is much better where it's been developed. At the beginning of the road is tough, but we can't do anything about that right now, so. Any other questions from the board?
Just so I'm clear, the total's for 4 lots.
4 lots.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay, I'll entertain a motion on Highland Ledgers.
I'll make a motion to approve the preliminary application for a minor subdivision on Ledge Road, Assessors Plat 317, Lot 73.1 in the RR3 zone for 4 lots on a 16.713 acre parcel. This favorable approval will be subject to the applicant obtaining an RIDEM on-site wastewater treatment system for each one of the 4 lots that's private building permit, to obtaining a soil erosion and sedimentation control permit, and approval from the Western Coventry Fire District. There does not appear to be any potential for further subdivision of this property. There's adequate street frontage based on the presentation that was made tonight. There appears to be adequate access for emergency service. Development complies with the town's comprehensive plan by discouraging development, having direct frontage on major streets, establishing a functional classification of roads, encourages residents to take, let me just see this, do not have direct frontage on major street. Ledge Road is a local road and not an interior collector road. Proposes parcels 1 to 4 maintain the rural character by complying with the minimum lot size and preserving the visual quality of the existing roadway. The proposed residential development is in keeping with the adjacent uses, and the proposed lot mimics other single-family residential uses found on Ledge Road. And I would lastly like to incorporate the planning director's report into the favorable approval.
Okay, I'm here, the applicant like to do the final administratively?
Yeah, I believe that would be appropriate, thank you.
Okay,
And with final approval to proceed administratively.
okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second it.
I have a motion by Mr. Clooney, a second by Mr. Pacelli. Any discussion?
Yes,
Hearing
sir.
none?
Excuse me. Thank you. Do you mind?
No, not at all.
There was no reference made to the stipulations that were proposed by the engineering and the public works department. Could you guys take a look at those, and at least go
He
down
did put
those?
the director's report in, though.
Excuse me?
He did. put the
Yes,
director's
so by incorporating the director's
Director's
report,
report.
does that mean, Mr. Clooney, that you want to incorporate all those stipulations into your approval this evening?
Just so there's no misunderstanding, I will read each of the items to
And
be
there is a
included in my favorable, my motion to approve, that the project should include widening of the gravel surface of Ledge Road to a minimum of 20 feet within the limits of the property, that the best stormwater management practices be provided to treat the water quality volume of runoff from the proposed driveways in accordance with the state stormwater manual and the state of Rhode Island stormwater management guide for individual single-family residential lot development, that the right-of-way recommendation, again, be consistent with what was presented. I did mention that. It will be 50 feet where it can be accomplished, and in those areas where it cannot be accomplished, 25 feet on the side of the road that's owned by the applicant. The gravel standard of a 24-foot roadway can be applied as long as the 24-foot width is constructed along the entire length of the property to the town of Coventry standards, and that all telephone poles within the proposed right-of-way need to be moved to the edge of the 24-foot gravel roadway as not to impede vehicular traffic, assuming you don't have an issue, because we didn't discuss that.
No, but I did ask for relief for the 24-foot width in the wetland and wetland buffer area to the existing roadbed, approximately 20 feet variance.
Okay, so I will amend my last statement to say this gravel standard of a 24-foot roadway should be applied, provided that it is, it doesn't require any additional permitting from the, in the area of the wetlands. He's gonna leave that as it is, just be in front of the lots. Hopefully that's clear.
Thank you, Mr. Clooney.
Okay, the motion's been amended, second amended, second is amended. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
Need a break? You good? Okay. Anybody need a break before we? Okay.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah. Okay, next is a preliminary plan public hearing for Green Farm Estates. Anybody here for the applicant, please?
I was hoping for somebody in between. I will have to do some lobbying on the agenda. Thomas Cronin, Nolan Bernero Cronin Farrar, 1070 Main Street, Coventry, Rhode Island, for the applicant. This is a preliminary plan application, AP 24, lot 26 and 31. It's vacant land, zoned R20. It's 12.18 acres. It's off the western side of North Road, but it's just south of the Coventry housing area, otherwise in a residential area composed of primarily single-family homes, with the exception of the Coventry housing. Their proposal is for a 17-lot subdivision consisting of single-family homes. We have master plan approval from the board. We have Kent County, Coventry has approved the sewer, West Warwick sewer system. Rhode Island DEM has provided water quality and RIPD's permits. I doubt you recall, we were here quite a few years ago, but when we did appear, we had two entrances to this property. After several hearings before this board, we have eliminated one of those entrances and has a single entrance opposite Sweet Fern Lane, and then it has a cul-de-sac, as you can see, traveling to the left there. The traffic study presented at master plan recommended that approach and some signage associated with that, and we've adopted what's been presented in that traffic plan. At master plan, we requested, once we decided on the single entrance, with the assistance of the board, we requested a waiver for a cul-de-sac in a major subdivision, as well as the length of the cul-de-sac in the major subdivision. And I'm here tonight before you to bring that up again. So that's still a waiver request tonight. The lots are otherwise conforming. The buildable area is conforming. I have Ben Cato from Millstone Engineering here with me to explain the design of the layout. So I'm not going to waste the board's time with any redundancy on that. I mentioned that we were here at Master Plan a good time ago, 2016. This board has extraordinary longevity, so a few of you at least were here for that as well. But we have water flowing down Tioga Hill on this property from off-site, from uphill, flowing across this property. It's presented a challenge in the design of this property, and Mr. Cato will discuss that as well. But we've been working with the town engineer since we submitted this project in late February, early March of this year to tweak and improve these drainage concerns. And as a result of those discussions, I have to come before you tonight and ask for several waivers. We're requesting a waiver from the volume requirement of subdivision regulations. We're requesting a waiver for the reduction of the width of roadway from 30 feet to 26 feet. We're requesting a waiver for removal of the sidewalks on one side of the roadway for the length of the roadway. And we're requesting a waiver for the removal of improvements to the proposed stub road, shown as New Road B on this plan, leading to the adjacent property. Each of these requests is an effort to reduce the impervious surface in this subdivision and improve the drainage qualities of the site. So, as I said, I don't want to talk site design because Mr. Cato will talk site design and we don't want to waste the board's time. There is one request from the town engineer that we could not reach an agreement on. You'll see in his stipulations that he requests off-site improvements. So, opposite this project is Sweet Fern Lane. It's a neighborhood of single-family homes, very nice. They have a private drainage system. And it's supposed to be run by the homeowners association, maintained by the homeowners association. Unfortunately, that has not taken place. This homeowners association called, let's see what the proper name of it is. It's not Sweet Fern, so it's a little confusion. Red Brook Meadow Homeowners Association, formed in 2006. It's been revoked. They failed to follow through with the homeowners association. Revocation is good as of February 2015. This presents a problem in dealing with the basin. However, the homeowners association documents do provide and allow the town to perform necessary maintenance and then force the payment of such costs against the homeowners on Sweet Fern Lane. The engineer is suggesting that those costs and that work be foisted on my client. I find that inappropriate. It's an off-site improvement. It's on private land. The town is requesting that we trespass on private land and make changes to the basin that we don't own, and we don't have the consent of the owners to improve. And it's frankly just too much risk and responsibility to the client. And I would suggest that stipulation be stricken from the requests and conditions put before this board tonight. We do pay impact fees on these 17 lots. Some of that money might be dedicated to improving what the town engineer feels is necessary. I just wanted to bring that up because as you listen to Mr. Cato and his presentation on the site design, this is an issue that I'd like for you to consider. I'll be happy to discuss it with you after Mr. Cato makes his presentation. So I'll introduce Mr. Cato and have him go through the site design and then be prepared to answer any questions you might have in that regard.
Would it be okay if I just asked our solicitor to voice his opinion on that defunct homeowners association?
Well, I think Mr. Cronin described it accurately. So the situation is that Sweet Fern Lane has a drainage device that is the town's responsibility, but because it's a town road, but as was contemplated, the homeowners association would be responsible for the cost, any costs associated with fixing that. So it's accurate to say that if the town went in there and expended monies to clean that out, the town has the right to lien the property owners within that development because the homeowners association no longer exists. You know, that's you can see the drainage. It's in the it's that area right there that Director Crossman's pointing to. So you know, there's options available. Frankly, and I don't want to get too into this, but we've had some discussions with this developer in light of the fact that our engineering department has requested this developer take care of this off-site improvement. He's right. In order for them to do it, they'd be trespassing on private property. So we talked about perhaps maybe a cost sharing, but you know, I don't think it's appropriate for this body to hold this applicant to that off-site expectation, quite frankly. To the extent that the drainage issue is a problem that the town has identified, the town can take action to offset that, and the town can seek recovery of those costs from that homeowners association. If there is a gratuitous input from Green Farm Estates developer towards that cost, so be it. But I don't think there's certainly no legal obligation for this developer to cover something not in his development.
And this sounds exactly like we heard the solicitor from the town of East Greenwich ask us if we would be willing to grant him or kind of pass that through. That's the same power that
It's very
the town has it.
correct. It's very similar. It's very similar. That dealt with two towns. I'm confident at answering the question as your solicitor that if that basin needs to be addressed, the town has the authority to address it, and there is a built-in mechanism to seek recovery of those costs from the homeowners in that Sweet Fern Lane development.
Thank you.
And Mr. Cronin, I'm sorry, I just missed the stipulations. There were 5 in the planning director's report. I just want to make sure did I catch them all? I got the 26-foot width, the sidewalk. You don't want to actually make the improvements to New Road B that's shown on the plan?
Sure. If I could just go to the board. Mr. Crossman, could you put the plan up?
There was a waiver at the beginning that I missed. That's what I was trying to get at.
To do with the drainage, the volume.
Okay.
So when we were here at master plan, this property belongs to Mr. Two-Rig. I apologize, I might have just mispronounced his name. He appeared, and this is currently vacant land. He indicated that someday he might want to develop it.
Is this the property that's located in between?
That's the one.
And he came, okay, all right.
He persuaded the board at that time that we should construct this stuff to nowhere. Well, not to nowhere.
To his property.
And one of the waivers I'm requesting here is to leave that property, but to not improve it. So it would be unimproved. This curve would come across here, and this driveway would come into this curve, and this would remain undeveloped land.
Should the town decide to pursue it later? Thank you.
I have the plan if you want to see it.
Yeah. So, so this is what it would look like now.
I'm fine. Yeah.
Whoa, you gotta tell me. I gotta get over.
Well, it's all good.
No, I'm fine. That's what I thought, but I just wasn't sure.
Sure. All right, so I'll introduce Mr. Cato to go over the site design and answer any questions you might have with regards to that.
Good afternoon, Benjamin Cato, registered professional engineer, state of Rhode Island, with Millstone Engineering, located in Warwick, Rhode Island. And I'm here to go over the technical design, the technical aspects of the proposed subdivision. My overview typically goes through a lot of the information that Mr. Cronin already reviewed, and I'd be happy to do that again. But to sum it up, it's a 12-acre parcel that's currently wooded. We were before this board for master plan at that time. We had shown some additional lots on the property. We had to reconfigure some lots. We, as Mr. Cronin mentioned, we added a stub road to the property to the west, which is on the top part of the plan you see before you. And we eliminated a secondary access point, which is the frontage piece located kind of in the middle portion of the property. There was a concern there from the town relative to site distance from Old North Road. So in doing so, we've extended the cul-de-sac as you see it before you. And what we've shown on this property, I'm sorry, on this plan, to reiterate, is some of the waivers that we've requested, and you can see in the gray shading is the actual paved areas of the site within the right-of-way. And we've eliminated, as we just mentioned, the paving of New Road B in an effort to reduce impervious coverage of the site until such time that the town decides it needs to improve that road to gain access to another property if that ever happens. We've also requested a reduction of roadway width, to 26 feet, and the elimination of the sidewalks to try to, again, cut down on that impervious area. The reason for this, the majority of these waivers, Mr. Crossman, would you mind going to the one of the grading plans?
Sure.
So, state,
This one fine?
yes. This project is over 1 acre of construction, which then triggers statewide that you apply to DEM, as you probably are aware, for a RIPDES permit. And RIPDES deals with stormwater and soil erosion and control measures, and there are many requirements that every developer, every proposed development has to meet along the way to gain any approvals from the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management. And those are highlighted in the stormwater manual that is published online that you can, I'm sure you're very, very familiar with, as all of these projects have, in the last 8 years, come around to the newer storm regulations that DEM has promulgated. And in part of that, you have to do two main things with stormwater. You have to match or reduce stormwater flow, and you have to match or reduce stormwater flow in the state of Rhode Island. So what that means is you have an existing property, the rain falls on it, and the rain collects into some kind of maybe minor stream, and it eventually leaves the property. And we measure that, we calculate what that existing flow rate would be, and the flow rate is the amount of water over time. So if you can imagine the faucet turning on, that's what you're looking at. So we take a look at that in the existing condition, then we have to match that or reduce it in the proposed condition. And we do that with any number of things. Most commonly you see detention ponds or infiltration basins where it collects the water and meters it out over time, or it sends it into the ground. And that way the amount of water that leaves the property either match or reduces what's there today. And we've done that here. In fact, we've reduced the flow rate here by a tremendous amount in 3 of our 4 locations. The one that matches flows is one that doesn't actually get into a stormwater basin because it's across a backyard, essentially. So we've got significant reductions in stormwater flows, and the stormwater flow is the damaging thing that you see and you read about in the news. That's when you have erosion. That's when you have any kind of a blowout of a roadway you might see, or an uprooting of a tree, happens because of the flow rate. Again, it's the turning on the faucet, and the velocity of the water running over the land is what's doing that. Now, the town of Coventry also has those same requirements. And again, for the stormwater runoff, we meet those requirements. But the town of Coventry also has a requirement for volume. And what that means is the regulation states that a developer cannot, or development cannot, increase the amount of volume of water that leaves a property. Now, volume is different than runoff for 2 reasons. One, there's no velocity associated with it. So it's not running across the land. So it doesn't have the harm that runoff does. And secondly, it is, lost my train of thought, I apologize. So the second part of the volume piece is that you can't reduce your volume unless you have soils that will infiltrate the water. So if you can imagine you have a cup of water and you turn your faucet on for 3 seconds, you've got that amount of volume fits there, no problem. But if you turn the water on and you let it run for 1.5 minutes, you're going to overflow that cup. But if you poke a hole in the cup, you may not overflow. So that's how the infiltration works. And the way we reduce volume rates is we have detention ponds. We size these ponds based on volume so that we can hold this water in a pond and then let it meter out over time. So after the rain stops and everything is starting to dry up, then these ponds are slowly letting the volume of water out, whether they're out through the groundwater, into the groundwater through the soils, or into a outlet control structure of a pond, and then it makes its way downstream. So we have, in this particular property, we have a case where we don't have infiltration rates that are high enough to allow all of the volume to go in. Now, we do, the waivers we're seeking are not major. We're talking about a 2% increase in a 100-year storm. If you can visualize a 100-year storm, it's not even the 2010 rains that we had. That was something different, but it was about similar to that amount of rainfall over 24 hours rather than the 36 or 48 hours that storm was 8 years ago. So what we've asked for here is a waiver in two locations. We have this pond here. This pond is known as Pond A, and in Pond A, although it looks like it's a monster pond, it's only 3 feet deep. So we have, the pond is located at the bottom of a slope. So the land comes down, and then there's a basin, and then there's a little berm to the south, and then it comes back to existing grade at the property line. So although it looks quite large, it's really just only 3 feet deep. And the reason we made that pond the size and shape and size that we did, as Mr. Cronin alluded to, was the amount of off-site water that's running to this property. This property just to the north, just to the east, the top of this page, is the high point of the watershed break to Lake Tyoke. So off the page toward the ceiling goes to Lake Tyoke, our site, and below goes to the Patuxent River. So the property that's located to the west, on the top part of that property, currently when it rains it goes through our property. But it's a massive area. It's like 7 acres of watershed are going through this property. And we couldn't, in good conscience, just allow that to pass through and not try to detain it. So what we proposed here is we've created an oversized basin which takes all this water, it holds it for 48 hours, so that as it's raining through everywhere else, all that water that would normally hit the surrounding communities are now in this basin. 48 hours later, it starts to meter out, and in doing so, it reduces any impact to the neighboring properties that you'd see today. We looked at this very carefully because we wanted to make sure that whatever anybody at this neighboring property experiences today as far as stormwater runoff, whatever they're experiencing today, they're going to see less at the end of this development. That's Basin A. And then on the other sheet, these two basins over here, they're smaller basins at the entrance to our property. These are the C basins. These basins, again, reduce the runoff rate, which is the damaging stormwater component. It reduces that below existing rates. These basins we're actually proposing to tie into a catch basin located at the corner of the intersection of Sweet Fern Lane and Old North Road. That's the furthest extent into any neighboring streets that we would be looking to connect. There's a sewer connection there as well, just next to the stormwater system. So again, we're reducing the stormwater rates. The volume we're not reducing here, but we have done some extensive research and into the drainage system that's in Sweet Fern Lane, the downstream detention basin that's in Sweet Fern Lane, and we found that because of the amount of water that we're holding back and the time that we're holding it back, the performance of that basin actually improves. So it doesn't fill as high, and the amount of runoff that's going out of that into the wetland that's further east also is reduced in that flow rate. So it's helping that pond as well. The rooftops, in an effort to further reduce any impervious that might run off site, the rooftops for every house are proposed to connect to infiltration chambers to be underground. We have the water quality features in this project are sand filters, and I know many of you are familiar with this from other projects, but a sand filter, just to reiterate, it's just that it works like your swimming pool filter might. It has sand in it. Water's collected into a small depression that has grass. You would kind of not really know that's what it is. It's not supposed to look like a sandbox. It's not supposed to look like a septic system. It's a grassed area with little drain holes in it, and underneath the grass is a layer, substantial layer of sand that filters any contaminants that might be in the water from the roadway before it goes on into the detention basins. Project does have a RIPDs and water quality permit. And then as far as other utilities go, as mentioned, we have public water in Old North Road. We have approvals from the Kent County Water Authority. There's public sewer. You may remember, if this is going back quite a ways, but when we first came for pre-app, we proposed septic systems for these lots because there is no sewer fronting these lots. And after some discussion about the concerns of the water, the groundwater in the area, we were able to engineer and get approvals for a sewer connection to an existing sewer manhole in Sweet Fern Lane. We have approvals from the town to do that. We also have, just to kind of dot the i's, we have our approval letter from the Central Coventry Fire District for the roadway layout as well as the hydrant spacing. And I think that's the extent of my presentation, kind of my dissertation. If you have any questions, though, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions from the board? I am glad you brought up because I know when we started this, there were septic designs planned. And after a lot of discussions, the developer agreed to hook up to the sewer. So that's definitely gonna help the surrounding areas for runoff.
Sure, and it's half, I should mention, it's half gravity, roughly half gravity and half E1 system. E1 pump system.
Any other questions?
So if I understand this, you are all set with the stormwater aspect from DEM. It's just the town that you need the waiver from?
That's correct.
And that strictly deals with the volume?
That's correct.
Okay. So let me just ask a hypothetical question. If you were to eliminate one house lot, would you be able to engineer your way out of that and not require the waiver?
It's a good question, and we looked at that, and the answer is no. So when you, the factors that we have to use when we calculate these volumes are such that if you had a wooded lot today and you cut all the trees down and planted grass and you couldn't infiltrate at a higher rate, you'll have a volume problem. Just because by the numbers that are used nationally, the grass absorbs less water than a forest. So if you can't infiltrate it at a higher rate, we are infiltrating here. We're infiltrating at 1 inch an hour. If we could get 3 or 4 inches an hour, you could eliminate the volume problem.
So if you left one wooded lot or constructed an additional catch basin, that would not in any way reduce the request for the waiver? You don't have a choice?
That's correct. You would not have a choice.
Just to keep on with the same question, if you don't mind. You know, he was alluding to the fact that we're just trying to prevent, you know, having to go in a direction that's just not in the betterment of the town or the neighborhoods or the neighbors. What if you went on to remove 2 houses? Would that benefit it? That and leave 2 wooded lots and then build a basin?
So the amount of, you'd have to look at, it's a very complex, it's not just taking out the house, because to take the house lot out, if you left that wooded, how do you build a road? Because in some cases, the road has to cut down to meet slopes. So let's assume we take 4 house lots off at the end of the cul-de-sac. So we still have to do grading over there to make the basin work. So that area would go from woods to grass, and that's not going to help. So again, we're looking at, it's a small percentage. It's a 2% increase in a 100-year storm. But to obtain that, you're knocking off more houses than would make this a feasible project with the amount of roadway that has to be constructed.
To the layman, though, the 2% increase, it just seems like it'd be easily achieved on the other end being 2%. That's why.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way.
Okay.
Because of the factors that are involved, it's not a straight 1-to-1 ratio. So, and again, this water is just, it's not we're taking 2% more water and we're throwing it into people's yards. There's 2% of water sitting in a detention pond for 48 hours before it comes out, is what we're talking about.
And it was your testimony, if I'm not understanding, that you're improving the actual stormwater flow to abutting properties by collecting it and treating it. In other words, you've reduced the velocity, and I'm sorry, I don't recall the exact terminology
Yeah,
that
that's
you were
correct.
referring to. And so in other words, there's a betterment there, and the only issue was the town's regulation for the volume. You've exceeded it by 2% because they have a very stringent 100-year floodplain requirement, and the 2%, in your opinion, is insignificant and outweighs the flow improvements that you've made onto abutting properties.
That's a great way to put it, and I have those numbers. Because, for example, in the large basin, Basin A, the runoff, the detrimental one, the velocity water, the water that's running across the land in a 100-year storm, as proposed, will be reducing that by 23%, just on Basin 1. On the other two basins, we're reducing them by 34% and 73%. So a lot less water is getting out off of this property during the storm. A little bit more is being held in a pond and coming out after the storm is over.
Okay.
And that was, excuse me, and that was stipulated in the plans, and I'm sure I could find somewhere that our town engineer signed off of. That's just not hearsay. You're not just saying, hey, we made it better.
It's in the planning director's report, where it's mentioned that,
I'm just speaking of the 20, that, what did you say, 27% improvement or something?
yeah, no,
Those numbers are actually in the report.
those are in the drainage report, correct, yes,
Okay.
absolutely. And they're actually in the, any responses to comments that we've had back and forth with the engineering department, that's all been highlighted in there as well, yep.
You know, because now it becomes fact, you know. So
Oh, yeah,
that's what
absolutely.
I'm
No,
saying.
that's a fact.
It's important that we have this discussion.
So, Mr. Cato, it sounds to me like these neighbors of this surrounding property are dealing with a lot of runoff right now.
Right.
And you feel that this developed parcel, the runoff will be decreased to the adjacent neighbors.
Right. So to circle back just a little bit, when we started looking at, when we come from master plan, we haven't done the hard engineering work yet. We look at buildable areas, we look at general layouts. In this case, we looked at traffic. And then after we got our master plan approval, we started to look at the real stormwater engineering of the project. And that's when we saw how much off-site flow is getting in here. And there's a natural swale kind of at the bottom of this property. We're proposing that basin, and the water is running through there today. And we realized that it's going to be a concern for the neighbors. So as part of our redesign, we cut 2 lots out of the subdivision. It was a 19-lot subdivision in master plan. The areas for those 2 lots went into stormwater drainage facilities. And again, we're reducing it by 23%. Now, I know this board is its own autonomous board, but I wanted to let you know that the 23% could be 0% and be approved for runoff rate. I'm not talking about volume, but runoff rate. And then we'd have to deal about volume. But from the state level, the 0% increase in runoff would have been approved. That certainly is approvable. And there's no volume requirement. So what I'm trying to get at is just telling you that we really went above and beyond, in my opinion, to try to mitigate the existing stormwater flow that's here and make it so that it is not as impactful as it is today when this project is built.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
I'd just like to comment on Mr. Anderson's comment. They have, Ben and the town engineer have worked very hard. The last 7 months, they've been going at this. They've submitted numerous reiterations, making design changes here, tweaking this, tweaking that. Mr. Cronin and myself met with the town engineer, maybe it was a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, prior to this meeting, and he did say to both of us in that meeting that Millstone had done everything they possibly could do to get that volume down to just that 2% increase, and he was okay with that increase. And and we advised Mr. Cronin advised him that he would still have to ask for that waiver, and he did not have an issue with that. So just to follow up with you, he was okay with that. So is that correct, Mr. Cronin?
Yes.
And again, the numbers we're talking about, I'm not trying to reiterate too much, but they are the 100-year storm numbers. So on average, this pond is not going to see anything close to those numbers in it. The difference between a everyday storm event like we had last night and a 100-year storm, which might be a Category 4 hurricane or something, is obviously tremendous.
Any other questions? Mr. Cato? Okay, hearing none.
Mr. Chairman, I did bring along Kevin Albertson, the landscape architect here because, as Mr. Crossman mentioned, we've been actively working on these plans since we've submitted them. And changes have been made, as we went along. And he's here to discuss those changes if the board would like him to cover those.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Kevin Alverson. I'm a licensed landscape architect and president of Kevin M. Alverson Landscape Architecture in Whitford, Rhode Island. Oh, Alverson, A-L-V as in Victor, E-R-S-O-N as in nickel. I was hired to conduct a landscape architectural work for this project, which originally was submitted back with the preliminary submission back in October of 2018, largely with a traditional subdivision. This matter, the landscaping focused largely on street tree requirements that are outlined in the town's subdivision and land development regulations. So what we had proposed is street tree spacing in compliance with the town's requirements, as well as sizes for the trees, which essentially it's a mixture of larger trees, which are spaced between 50 and 75 feet on center. Those would be like larger shade trees, oaks, maples, things of that nature. And also incorporated some medium-sized flowering trees. Those are spaced somewhere in the range of 35 to 50 feet on center, which is all in keeping with the town's requirements for that. As Mr. Cato has testified earlier, there have been various changes to the road, changes to the drainage basins, things of that nature. So I've been trying to keep up as we go along with those changes. There were also some comments in addition to engineering and drainage comments that were proposed by or presented, I suppose, by the town staff. There were some comments about additional buffering that the town planner and engineer would like to see, particularly when it comes to these basins that were just being discussed. So the latest incarnation of the plans addressed the layout modifications to the basins. Those plans were generated back in June, and obviously since then there's been a lot of back and forth with some minor tweaking and things with the engineering. But at that point, we had presented a plan which I guess is further on in the, is it later on, Mr. Crossman? Nope, that's it.
No. I guess we'll have to use the one that Ben has on the board.
Sure. With your permission, I'd like to just go over to the board then, so I could show on some of the focus areas that we looked at. So this is the area closest to Basin A, which Mr. Cato had described earlier. It's the larger basin at the southern portion of the site, at the southern end of the cul-de-sac. What we looked at doing was, in addition to keep maintaining all of the required street tree requirements along the plan, we provided a mixture of for buffering for future residents of the development, as well as the abutters to the south and east of the development. We provided a mixture of all native evergreen and deciduous trees and shrubs, sort of a mixed buffer, strategically placed to buffer the grading work from the basin from the abutting neighbors of Trafford Park Lane, as well as down at the southeast corner of the site. So we focused a lot of our buffering plantings there, and then for the buffer for the basins at the very slick. For the two smaller basins, ponds C1 and C2, it's at the northeast part end of the site. There are some limitations to what we can do as far as planting around these basins. We can't plant woody vegetation within the side slopes of it, because it would affect how the basin actually functions. So there's some stipulations about that as well as access around the basin, so we can make sure to maintain the basins. But where we have the room itself to buffer these basins from the new entrance roadway as well as the two abutters that are out across from Sweet Fern Lane, we did provide a mixture of evergreen and deciduous shrubs and some ornamental grasses where possible. This is also going to be an area that's going to get a lot of snow load and things that might go on here, so these would provide some buffering while also not getting crushed by snow load. But where we did not have the room, we are proposing a 6-foot solid panel fence along the edge of the property. So that again is to make sure that we maintain at least 8 feet, I believe it is, of maintenance access and clearing around the tops of the basins, and also suitably buffer the basins from the abutting properties. That really sums up the landscape architectural component of the project. As the waivers and things are being considered, certainly any additional modifications that need to happen, adjusting plants for utilities, pavement edges, and things that will be handled at the next round, I suppose. So if there's any questions.
on the board for Mr. Alverson? Okay, hearing none, fine up.
Mr. Chairman, one item which just hasn't come up was that master plan. We had eliminated the center circle in the cul-de-sac, as is the preference of this board historically. That center area has been replaced as part of these discussions to improve the drainage and increase the impervious surface on the site. I just wanted to point that out, as I would normally not present a plan that, even though the Coventry ordinance requires a center circle, the historical preference of this board and the DPW is to not have them. I have discussed with the town engineer the type of curbing, some kind of sloped curbing, so as not to interfere with the DPW operations and still gain that center space as not impervious surface. That is a change from master plan that hasn't come up during our discussion, because it actually conforms with the Coventry ordinance, and I'm usually asking for a waiver to pave that sucker over. But in this case, I'm going to keep it. Thank you. I don't have any further witnesses. The folks that presented and the developer, Mr. Green, are here to answer any questions you might have. But that's the end of our presentation.
I have one question. Since this pond retention area is going to capture some water on a significant storm, will it be necessary for fencing around that, for children? How deep will that water get?
Mr. Cato has a...
We have another issue on another development in town. I just wanted to ask that question.
Yeah, so I have that here. Just bear with me for a second. The pond is 3 feet high from base to the top of the berm. And the pond has a 1 foot, what they call freeboard area. What that means is in a 100-year storm event, based on the model that we do, the pond will fill up to a certain level, and then we have another foot of just in case space. And so to answer your question, you're looking at 2 foot depth in a 100-year storm.
I think there still should be a fence.
Okay.
I'm just concerned about the children in the neighborhood.
We would obviously coordinate anything with DPW to make sure that it's accessible and what have you, providing the safety, but also the accessibility for maintenance.
Okay, thank you. Anybody need a break before I open up public hearing? We good? Okay. All right, I'll make a motion to open up public hearing.
Motion to open public hearing?
Motion by Mr. Mattson, second by Mr. Kalunian. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, I will get to everybody. I'm gonna start on the right side here, because I see a lot of heads shaking. I will get to, everybody will be allowed to speak. Anybody on the right side, go ahead, come on up. Name and address, please, when you come up.
Hi, Kathy Driscoll, 25, Driscoll, 25 Trafford Park Drive. Thank you. So my property abuts where the pond is going to be. We currently have drainage issues on Trafford Park Drive. So my backyard is basically lower than Trafford Park Drive, lower than where this development is going to go. So by putting the pond there, my concern is, and maybe you can help me figure this out, but they did put another drain on Trafford Park Drive to help with the drainage. But if there's an overflow, it goes into my backyard. If you're going to put a pond there, you're going to put a berm there. So the water coming down Trafford Park Drive is not going to go naturally into the woods. It's going to end up in my yard. And then the water coming from the new development is going to go into that pond, but I have my leach field in my backyard, so if that water drains out, it's going to undermine, I'm afraid it's going to undermine my leach field and cause me problems that I've never had. So I'm just concerned about all this water, because right now, all the water is in that area is naturally going into the ground. You pull all those trees up, you put a development there, all that water has to come somewhere. So it's not naturally going into the ground, it's going basically into my backyard, or right near my backyard. So I'm just concerned about the drainage. The other issue I had, or was questioning, was the maintaining of this pond. You know, we've had issues with Triple E. That just came to me the other day, worried about maintaining this, treating it, if there's going to be water in there, if they're going to put grass in there, cutting it, otherwise I'm going to could have a large tick population. So I just am concerned about that and just wanted somebody to help me understand how that's going to help me, because it doesn't seem like the drainage is going to help me right now. So I don't know if you can.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, would you want to address each question as they?
That's up to you, Mr. Chairman. We would, usually do not respond.
We could address them collectively, or we could address them one by one.
It's really up to you.
Why don't you address it?
So the first part is drainage from Trafford Park Drive. It appears to me that this is a maintenance issue with the Trafford Park drainage system that actually goes the other way. But what happens is the catch basin gets clogged, and then water pools in that cul-de-sac and then meanders its way through those properties and ends up in the backyards. When we do our drainage analysis, we incorporate the surrounding properties to the extent that they would shed that way naturally based on the topography, and that's part of our analysis. And that is exactly why the basin is where it is and how big it is to try to take some of that flow that's coming. If it were to come from Trafford Park Drive and from the land to the west, it obviously is coming together there at the back line of those properties and making its way down toward Old North Road. We put a basin in that location, choked it back, so the flow, that the majority of that flow today, by analysis, is coming from the property that our development is on, as well as the property to the west. And so the basin that's there is going to hold on to that. So now all that's left is the piece that's coming from Trafford Park Drive, and that's something that's out of our control at this stage. The idea being that the amount of water that's there tomorrow will be less than the amount of water that's there today. So the impact should be less. So we're doing what we can on our side to just really, we oversize that basin to help with that situation. The second part was the septic system. And that's a good question, but the basin, as is proposed, meets all the DEM setbacks to septic systems. So we could have septic systems, in other words, closer to this basin than the property line. So your septic system is more than far enough away by the standards that DEM has to be impacted by these detention ponds. And they've done extensive studies as to how a detention basin could, or a natural pond for that matter, could impact a septic system and vice versa.
So how does that pond work? So does it have something at the bottom where it just naturally flows? Out?
Some of it goes into the ground.
Okay.
And some of it, there'll be basically a drain, for lack of a better term.
Okay.
But the drain is sized so that it goes out very slowly.
And when I walked the property, I walked it this weekend, and the natural culvert or the natural.
So it's a swale right there,
Swale,
yes.
Sorry,
Yep.
I can't never remember that name. When I followed that swale, that actually came right out to the back of a neighbor's yard on Old North Road. So that was my other concern, was for that neighbor, that if you're taking all that water, putting it in there, and then draining it out that natural swale, it's gonna impact that person's yard. So I didn't know how that was gonna work.
So we've actually, in negotiations or in working with the town, we've pulled that pond further away from the property line to create and enhance the swale that's there, to try to keep any water that's running fully on this property. So it doesn't go over the property line, and we've slowed it down so that it shouldn't be what you see today. The other question you had was relative to maintenance and mosquitoes. So the ponds have to be sized. It's a kind of an iterative process, because it has to hold back the water, but it can't hold it back for so long that mosquito larvae can form. So the basin is designed to empty in 72 hours, which prevents the mosquito population from increasing. As far as maintenance, there's a extensive maintenance operation and maintenance plan that's associated with the RIPD's permit. It's been submitted to the town. It's also on the drawings themselves as to the length of the grass, how long it can get, how often it's mowed. That's all spelled out. And when we had talked at the master plan stage, we had talked about the town taking over the maintenance. And that's what some of the comments from engineering were relative to maintenance and access and the ability to keep those basins operating correctly.
Yeah, that was because I know that DPW has, whenever they go through budgets, they're always, saying we're gonna cut from DPW. And my concern is that they're not gonna have enough personnel. It's not yours, but
Right.
I mean, my concern for the town is that they're not gonna be able to maintain that. So I just don't know where that's gonna be.
Yeah, that's a budgeting issue for the town, is how they prioritize funds. But I can tell you that it is spelled out, the schedule and the type of maintenance that needs to occur at these facilities.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on this side? Come on up, sir.
Hi, Sheldon Clark. I live at 49 Old North Road. That would be down in the lower corner. My concerns are with the size of that pond and then them asking for a waiver of 2% on the volume. I'm downhill from that thing. It's quite a difference in elevation. I brought this up at the last meeting back in 2016 or whatever it was. I'm just worried about that volume affecting like my property, getting into my home, and also a brand new septic system that I just had to put in. The other concern of mine is on the north end of the property, where they're talking about doing the curbing and that leaving that road there. I don't understand why there's a road there. That's access to somebody else's property. My concern is down the road, that gets paved. We're gonna develop the back property. More traffic's gonna cut through there out to Old North Road. We've already done a traffic study and seen how much traffic is on that road. I have a feeling down the road it's gonna get worse. So those are my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Want to do them collectively, and well, let's do them collectively. You're good at taking notes, Mr. Croner.
Okay. Can I just clarify?
Sure.
Which lot was Mr. Clark's?
Right here.
Right at the bottom.
All right,
Thank you.
sure.
Anybody else on this side of the room? Come out, man.
Good evening, I'm Pauline Kelly, I live on 48, I don't abut that property. My concern is traffic. When the survey was done in 16 and the meters were up for counts, there were 1,400 cars that went through that road in a short period of time of a week or less. It has since substantially increased. It has become a racetrack at times. There's a dangerous curve close to Angus Street. If we add another street with more houses and more traffic, it's going to get worse. It's an unsafe place. That's my biggest concern. Another thing is, they mentioned something about the trees, planting all these bushes and trees at so many feet to look so nice. Why can't they leave half of what's there? Why do they have to destroy everything that's there, especially the ones that abut the houses on North Road? Why they can't leave some of the wildlife that's already there? What's wrong with it? It's pines, it's oaks, it's maples. Why destroy everything and put more new ones in? Makes no sense. On many of the issues, he said, we're trying. We need concrete words of what they're doing to eliminate the water issues, not trying. Our concern is the other people. And how do you direct water to go directly to the basin from all of that property? Hey, water, you gotta get in the basin? It ain't gonna work. That's my issues. Thank you for your time.
Anybody else on this side? Come on up, sir.
Good evening. Michael Campagna, 20 Trafford Park Drive. Campagna. You're welcome. Just more of a clarification. When you did your studies on this for the water and the volume and everything, what was brought into that? Was it just that neighborhood or the neighborhood to the north and also Trafford Park Drive? And with that, because Trafford Park Drive pitches this way, the neighborhood behind that pitches down. Everything runs kind of south. If, like was talked about before, the maintenance of that, the overflow of the water, on the right-hand side of the cul-de-sac on Trafford Park Drive, there's a family just moved in with 3 young kids. If you have mosquitoes and ticks and everything else, with the additional water and the maintenance, you know, you're gonna get more animals and Tripoli and everything else. What I think was talked about earlier was the homeowners association on Sweet Fern Lane that is now defunct, that can't take care of their thing. You mentioned it's the town of Coventry's cost. If there's a homeowners association back there that goes defunct, town of Coventry maybe doesn't have the money, that pond gets overgrown, overflown, and because all the snow from my neighborhood gets piled up in the cul-de-sac, so that's going to run down. Everything from the new neighborhood is pitching that way to the pond, so now that's going to be more water. It's just simple gravity. So it was just a clarification. Was that taken into consideration in your volume?
Mr. Chairman, can I just ask the gentleman?
Sure.
Sure. When you speak of the other neighborhood, could you give us a street
Sure.
name or provide some clarification on that? Careful of that.
Yep. I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. So this street here runs this way. When this street gets plowed, everything gets plowed into this corner. Okay? With this pond back here, the neighborhood comes this way. If it's sloped this way, everything is going to drain behind here. All the land back here pitches this way down here. So now you're going to have additional water. Sorry if I screwed that up. I want to know, was that this neighborhood, this figured into the volume for that pond? Because right here, family just moved in with 3 young kids. There's a school, Tallwoods School's right around the corner too, straight over the house. So that's the concern.
Thank you. Anybody else on this side? Come on up, sir.
Hi, I'm Ray Costa from 40 Old North Road. My question is, what are you going to do with Old North Road? I mean, right now, it's a mess. There's all kinds of bumps, there's all kinds of curves, and plus you're adding more houses to dump onto Old North Road. And you got a future area that goes over to the part that's unbuilt and it's not it won't be in any kind of maintenance or anything for quite a while. So now when that is approved, that main piece up that's all woods now, it's all gonna dump onto Old North Road. Now you've got a road there, from what I understand, is 33 feet. And the road itself is probably around 23, 24. And most of these roads are 26. So that means that you've got 17 units here, and no one knows how many more units there will be in that area that's not developed yet. So that's all going to dump onto Old North Road out of this one exit. You've got another exit down, further down to Angus Street, but that you're going to have the same problem. All of this, what you see right now, has to exit at that main entrance right there. And the new section, someday, who knows how many houses will come from there. And like I say, they're all going to go to Old North Road, which is problems right now. In the wintertime, you can barely get through with all the ice and snow that's piled up on each side of the road. So my question, like I say, is what are you going to do with the road?
Thank you. Anybody else on this side? Okay, what about this side? Come on up. I'll get to you next.
Good evening. My name is Michael Wheeler, Wheeler. I live at 35 Old North. Just a couple of things to reiterate some of the points that were already made about the tree line that would go behind our property. And do they plan on leaving any of that? Or are they just going to come and abut right to the property line as it is now? The water that they're going to hold in these basins, they say for 48 hours, but it's then going to be released. So it is still going to find its way, whether it's seeping into someone else's property or running into our property, it's still going to make its way to our property. I listened to about Sweet Fern. That's not really their fault that their association went defunct. So now if the town were to go in and clean that basin, it's at their expense. Are we going to have to some point in the near future say, tie into the sewer line at our expense? Is that anything that's in the plans? Because someone had mentioned that may happen, which I think would be unfair for us. I think that was all that she wanted. And then obviously the traffic. The traffic is, it is horrendous. It is a cut through, as everyone knows, and we're just going to increase that traffic tenfold. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Come on up, sir.
Good evening, Charles Calenda, Calenda, 29 Old North Road. I don't want to go into, again, repeat what a lot of people have already said about the rundown with the water. Obviously, my property would be abutting the proposed new roadway that is on the plans here. And I just want to echo my biggest concern is, in addition to the runoff concerns, the absolute danger that exists on Old North Road as it exists right now. I can tell you that at any given time, trying to back out of my driveway at 29 Old North Road, with the lack of visibility in both directions, is a hazard of being T-boned at any given time. And it's not just because of the speed of the vehicles that are coming through, it is because of the lack of ability to see in both directions. Coming from the direction going towards where Angus Street would come out towards New London Turnpike, there is a large incline, and that, from my perspective, from where my house would be. You have, I would guess, seconds if I'm backing out of my driveway to see that. The other direction, it's not necessarily as visible as that incline is on the other side, but when you come in front of the house immediately to my left, if I have my back to my house, my neighbor's house, there is an incline there where I can't even tell you how many times, nearly been T-boned as I come out of my driveway. The amount of traffic that's going through Old North Road, as narrow as it is, on a good day is horrific. When there's snow that's being plowed or other hazards on the road, as in water building up, which tends to pool at the bottom of my driveway when it's running off, it is exceptionally hazard. This is a cut through. People use this as a cut through, and the amount of traffic that has come through there in the 6 years that I've lived here since, and I think it's been 5 or 4 years when I last appeared before this board when there was a similar proposal that came here, has just been incredible. And I would suggest that this is as designed, that small space to put that roadway right there where it is next to my property would now create an additional hazard where somebody, not only my house, but the house on the other side of the proposed roadway, you have not only the people coming out from Sweet Fern to look out for, you have people coming from 2 different directions that are not visible but for seconds for you to make a decision. That is an exceptionally dangerous place to place the road, and I just think it is going to add to the hazards that are already in existence, and I think everybody has detailed in exceptional detail so far. So those would be my concerns.
Thank you. Anybody else on this side? Come on up, sir.
Hello, Tom Borowski, B-O-R-A-W-S-K-I. Well, I reside at 31 Old North Road, exactly the other side. Yes. Exactly on the opposing side of my adjacent tenant there. So many concerns echoing what has already been spoken of. Traffic is primarily a big concern to me. The gap there that exists currently where it is wooded area is very thin as far as width goes. Moving in there, I knew that it was an access road, but I had never thought it was going to be a primary 2-way road. I don't foresee it being wide enough. Nonetheless, Old North Road being wide enough to accommodate, we'll say, roughly another 34 cars every morning and evening coming through there. So that is one. Additionally, the reservoir behind my property directly, I understand that it dwells into the soil, and then there's an additional passage out through some piping systems. I'd like to get further clarification of where that system is going to go and where that water is going to drain out. Currently, if we do have a storm, there's runoff. We have all grassed areas, so the water essentially slicks off of it. There's some puddles left over, but everything is gone within 24 hours within my property. If there is a reservoir sitting behind my property, what does that mean for my soil to absorb it? Am I going to be sitting on water with puddles on my property for the next 3 days, or is that going to be normal operating procedure as I have today? The sewer build out is kind of surprising. I honestly didn't even know there was a potential for it on that road. I'd like to get a better understanding What that means impacting our neighborhood and the surrounding homes from a construction standpoint, but also from a town point of view. I know there's been lots of litigations around implementing sewers in Coventry, but if that gets opened up, what impact does that mean for all our neighbors? And lastly is the bordering property lines within the new development. So the backs of each homes, is there a clear border behind it? Is it open land? I'd kind of like to know what that development looks like, what my new backyard essentially is going to be. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else on this side? Come on up.
Kyle Marciano, Marciano, 26 Trafford Park Drive. I'm the house that I just moved into about 11 months ago. I do have 2 little children. One of the big concerns is that retention pond and the proximity to my property line. Having 2 little kids, the backyard is fenced in. However, little kids, get adventurous. So that would definitely be a concern. I did hear the idea of possibly being fenced off with a buffer to maintain it. I'd like for the board to definitely take that into consideration. Another issue with the maintenance of that area, why even give it to the town as an option? Like was brought up, budget's always an issue. Why make that an option to begin with? Why not leave it with the property owner now to fund it for X amount of time to ensure that that property is properly maintained and not even, give that option. Triple E is very real, as we all saw this year. I know 48 hours water standing there, it's not all going to drain out. The gestational period for a mosquito larva is 48 hours, so you definitely run the risk of additional breeding. Aside from that, I like to hear, what the plans are as far as that goes. That's all.
Thank you. Anybody else? Come on up.
Kathy Driscoll, 25 Trafford Park Drive. I just have a question. I thought when we were talking about other properties, you talked about a sidewalk. Have you done a sidewalk on this? You have?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I just didn't know if you had done that. All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else? Okay, Mr. Cronin, you're on.
All right. So, Mr. Chairman, I figure we'll take them in the order that they were raised, and if they become duplicative, maybe we'll clarify. I know some folks had some specific property questions, so we'll try to answer those.
I've heard a lot of traffic runoff.
Mr. Chairman, could I just interject just a couple of points? I think it might assist, because there were a couple of repetitive things that came up, for example, about the Red Brook maintenance issue, and that being the town's responsibility. I think a couple people brought that up. The indication was the town has the authority to go in and maintain and fix that, but then it also has the opportunity, pursuant to what was promulgated when that subdivision was approved, to then lien the properties in there to collect the money. So it's not like that's going to come out of taxpayer money. That money can all be recouped, including the legal fees to chase it. Is that correct, Mr. Solicitor?
That is correct, yes.
So a couple of people brought up the fact that Red Brook hadn't maintained its system, and was this going to fall into the same situation? So there's safeguards in place to make sure that that takes place. And the other thing was, with regard to that access road B that's not being paved, there's a gentleman that owns that large tract of land to the back that initially asked for that access. But similarly, there's another subdivision that's much further along. He has not proposed anything on his land, but on the other side of that, and it will be the same situation. So He, I believe, already has one, if not two, access points to his property. This would be a third, and then there's a fourth access point to another subdivision that was recently before this board, further along that abuts Ty Oak School. So I just don't want folks to think that as land gets developed, it's all gonna dump onto Old North Road, because that's simply not the case. It's just good planning practice to provide enough circulation for people to get where they need to go without all ending up in one place. And then lastly, just for my own edification, did we get a traffic study on this subdivision with the traffic going on and off Old North Road?
Yeah, we received that
did.
at the master plan.
And that was for 19.
Correct,
Okay.
and it was approved by this board.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure. I thought that was the case, but we didn't have it in our packet tonight. Okay.
So, Mr. Clooney, and I was ready to request the elimination of the stub to Mr. Tooridge property, but seems that,
Not so quick.
yeah, no, that would be fine. Let me put on the record that would be fine
You
with
don't
us.
have to build
Right,
it,
yeah.
but I want it.
Right, yeah. Okay. Mr. Cato, would you care to join me, and we'll try to not waste the board's time?
Not a waste at all.
All right, okay. So we dealt with Ms. Driscoll's questions as they were asked. Mr. Clark lives along Old North Road, well, on this drawing, to the corner of the retention pond. He has concerns regarding he had concerns regard to the stub that Mr. Clooney had addressed. We had questions with regard to the effect of the elevation change and the size of the pond on a septic system. So I believe we're talking about this piece of property, Mr. Cato.
Okay. So the change in grade there is, it's actually going to go up slightly from the common property line between Mr. Clark's property and the proposed development to create a berm that will hold back the water. That's what's gonna create that basin. So anything that's coming down that way today, and he's right, it does come through there today, it's gonna get stuck in that basin and be held back. And it'll come out, when it does come out, it'll be coming out at a lot slower rate. The water that people are seeing run across their property is gonna be greatly reduced. And then as far as the septic system, I think we addressed that. So when water enters the ground, it has kind of a cone shape around the facility, both in a septic system, the bottom of a septic system, the wastewater goes into the ground this way, and the bottom of a detention pond is very similar. And these are spaced such that the two cones don't intersect at any level that will impact either one.
Ms. Kelly had some concerns about traffic. As Mr. Crossman indicated, we did an extensive traffic study on this property, presented it to the board on a couple of occasions, made modifications to the plan at master plan with regard to the entryway, and the entrance itself is been placed consistent with that traffic engineer's opinion, the traffic controls, the stop sign. For this project, as well as Sweet Fern Lane, creating the maybe not perfect visibility, but the maximum visibility possible for this intersection.
And
So,
just to
yeah.
expand on that quickly, also recommended in that traffic study was the placement of additional signage along Old North Road. One showing that there's an offset intersection between Sweet Fern Lane and the proposed roadway. That's to be placed on Old North Road in a spot that's indicated. It's indicated on the site plan, but it's reflected in that traffic study. There's also a S-curve sign that's proposed in the vicinity of the bottom left on the plan where the road has that severe curve. And then also there was some recommendations of tree removal, which the developer it's on the plan, and the developer will work with the town to make sure that those trees can be removed to the extent that they're on town land, to help with the visibility in that area.
Ms. Kelly's last question was with regard to the, what if any vegetation would be left along the property lines, along the property on Old North Road?
So, and that was a statement that was, or a question that was asked by quite a few people. And the answer is, to put it bluntly, these are standard house lots. And people have backyards. People may want to use their backyards. We are proposing a swale, and there was another question that Ms. Kelly had, was how is the water going to get into these basins? So we are proposing a swale along that property line so that anything that runs off the proposed lots, the backyards of these lots, is collected before it gets into any existing properties, and it's routed into that basin. To put that basin in, it would involve some clearing of vegetation just to work the grades. So the two questions were very much linked.
So Mr. Campagna had questions with regard to this traffic, but he also had a question with regard to drainage. Mr. Crossman, could you put up the aerial? So, Mr. Cato, Mr. Campagna was asking whether the two-red property and the Trafford Park Drive neighborhood were included in the drainage study.
Yes, they were. When we do an analysis of existing conditions, before we can even look at the proposed development, we have to see how much water is flowing through our site today. And in this particular case, there is a large swath of the Tureg property and portions of the Trafford Park yards also drain, they shed right to that, the proposed development property. So that's all considered, and that's again why that basin is sized the way it is to try to reduce that flow from existing condition.
Mr. Costa is my champion for eliminating the stub to Mr. Tureg's property. Mr. Kalunian has shot that out of the air, so we will move along on that. Mr. Leary wanted to know if we were going to leave any trees along the property line, and he asked for the first time the effect of the sewer connection and the sewer line on the neighbors. And I understand part of that would be a town question, but if you could explain in a little more detail the sewer aspect of this property.
So what I think the question really was how badly is Old North Road going to be torn up? And the answer to his question with regard to sewer is that the sewer connection is going to be right at Sweet Fern Lane, so it's all around the intersection of Sweet Fern Lane and Old North Road. There will be some work in Old North Road along some of the other properties, the front on Old North Road, for water improvements that were mandated by Kent County Water as part of this project. They want to upgrade some of the line along there. So there will be some work in Old North Road. Obviously, we would aim to limit that to the extent possible, and then any contractor would have to file a road opening permit, file the traffic safety plans as appropriate for the work.
So this gentleman also raised the question of how you support your statement that these retention ponds are only going to retain the water for 48 hours. That came up a few times, but he initially asked that question, so if you could explain.
Our design is, we have what's called a low flow orifice, and what that means is in all of these basins, there is a way for the water to get out at the very bottom of the basin. And it's a small hole so that it doesn't pour out if you get a quick shot of rain in the summertime. But it's there to ensure that if it doesn't infiltrate into the ground for whatever reason, the low flow orifice does ensure that the basin does empty at a controlled rate. And we have, in our design, we provide a mechanism to prevent clogging of the orifice. It's located away from the bank of the berm, and it's surrounded by a crushed stone. It'll stick up out of the ground a little bit, be full of crushed stone, and what that does is allow the water to come in, but if any leaves or any other debris get into the basin, it doesn't clog that, so it will drain to keep it from ponding for an extended amount of time.
Mr. Leary also mentioned the traffic that's come up often, and Mr. Kalenda reiterated those concerns, in particular with his difficulty backing from his driveway. So the traffic study did call, from my recollection, traffic controls on both this property and on Sweet Fern, so that those two roads would be controlled by a stop sign, as I recall. Does that fit your recollection as well?
The stop sign is for the proposed road.
Okay.
There's no proposed stop sign on Old North Road.
Okay.
That would be something that would have to come from council, I believe.
Okay.
If that's mandated.
All right, and Mr. Kalenda and Mr. Borowski, and I apologize if I mispronounced that, live on either side of the entryway, and they had similar concerns about what they would see out their backyard. So why don't we start there?
So that roadway is located in that location because that's one of the few points that this property has access to Old North Road. That was one of the questions as to why it was placed there, but there is frontage there, so that's inherently where the driveway would be placed, the roadway would be placed. As far as what you would see, it would be it's just a typical town road, very similar to what Sweet Fern Lane looks like across the street, only you'd be going uphill instead of downhill. We have proposed a little retaining wall along the left side of the road to allow us to flatten the grade out, because it's kind of steep there today. If you remember when we walked the sidewalk, you have to climb that hill, and we don't want to have to do that with vehicles from a safety perspective. So it's a low retaining wall there, mostly at the intersection, but it meets all the site distance requirements. And then as far as behind the road, left and right would be smaller detention ponds, similar to what we saw on Pond A, but they're obviously not as big, and they perform the same way.
I believe the landscape architect mentioned some fencing at that point as well. Yeah.
Right. Wherever there's buffering was required as part of the discussions with the town staff, and if we couldn't provide landscape buffering because of any number of reasons, access or just physical space, we provided a fence in those areas, and will likely require fencing around any that are not for safety purposes as well.
Of the pond.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
And finally, the water from those two retention ponds, where will it go? Retain there, where does it go?
It's collected into a pipe. Both ponds are connected into a pipe that comes underground below the proposed roadway, and it ties into a catch basin at the corner of Sweet Fern Lane and Old North Road by pipe. So the idea is to try to limit any water pouring out of that hill on the roadway.
And Mr. Marciano, I apologize. He again had concerns with regard to the actual maintenance of the pond. So once it's installed, the town's going to maintain it. What kind of maintenance is going to be required? How does it get done? I know in part of our discussion with the engineer, preferred access by the DPW was one of the first items we discussed. They weren't happy with how we had designed the access to these ponds, and they had us redesign it so they could drive larger vehicles into and around the pond safely for the maintenance of the pond. But I'll let Mr. Cato speak with more expertise as to what the actual maintenance might be.
The maintenance is really, if it's done yearly, is quite simple in that it's you inspect the basin for any obvious signs of malfunction. That could be water in the basin when it's not supposed to be filled with water. It could be evidence of gullying or erosion, and we specify in our specs that those items be fixed as soon as they're evident. Obviously, we have in our notes it'll be coordinated with the town, but in this case it would be facilitated by the town. It has to be mowed. Grass heights can't be above 6 inches in height. Woody growth, so if you start to see a condition like we see now in Sweet Fern Lane, it gets taken care of annually, and you don't get trees growing on the sides of these banks because, like Mr. Alverson mentioned, that kind of hurts the integrity of the basins themselves to have woody growth in there. So we have access points. We have basically roadways down into these basins. They're 12 feet wide with a percent slope that's acceptable to the maintenance department, so that they can drive their vehicles or lawn maintenance apparatus down there without any difficulty. There's a checklist that is included in the operation and maintenance procedures, whether the town follows that or has their own, which I'm sure they do, that they go in every so often and they have to hit that checklist.
And I guess finally, Mr. Clooney addressed this, but several people asked what the plans were for the Turag property. those are unknown to us. I don't think any plans have been presented to the town, to my knowledge. It's simply a question that we can't address. So I think, Mr. Chairman, that I covered most of the questions, but I'm happy to clarify.
Well, before I close public hearing, I'll ask
Sure.
if anybody else has any questions. Before I close public hearing, is there anybody else that has any questions that weren't answered? Please come up. Come on up.
I'm sorry, Michael Wheeler, Wheeler. It wasn't answered because I forgot to ask it. Time frame. When is this all going to start? How soon how much time do we have to make a decision as to what we want to do as homeowners? Because I'm not sure I want the headache that's going to come along with this project.
Well, Mr. Chairman would be tipping his hand to answer that question. But should we receive approval, obviously there's an appeal period from every public hearing, but the final plans would be coming soon, right? This is a fully engineered project. There's no further obstacle. So I don't know when the actual houses would be built, but it's ready to be developed.
You're thinking this spring, probably.
Should it be approved?
Should it be approved?
Should I ask, or do you want to wait till you close public
Yeah.
hearing? I had a couple of comments.
Anybody else before I close public hearing? I see a couple of hands. The gentleman on the left, please, and I'll get to you right now. Come on up.
I'm sorry, Charles Calenda, Calenda, 29 Old North Road. Clarification on the signs that were going to be put in place on Old North Road, or recommended to be placed on Old North Road. Were those part of the traffic studies that were done? And when was the last traffic study that was done? I know one was discussed several years ago, but what was the most recent one?
I'll come to my phone. The signs are at the recommendation of the traffic engineer, and that study was completed and submitted in 2016.
Come on up, ma'am.
Name is Pauline Kelly, and I'm at 48, and I had talked about the traffic, Why would you want to put stop signs on Old North Road? They need to be on Sweet Fern Lane, which comes onto Old North Road. Those people don't stop. You need a larger than a postage stamp stop sign where the senior citizens come out of Old North Road, which is a 4-way stop, but they don't stop. I guess they don't see the sign, all of them. But I think the new road coming out of this new so-called development should have a stop sign also. Not a stop sign on Old North Road.
That's what it is.
I think it's proposed, correct?
That's what it is.
No, they proposed one on Old North Road.
At Old North Road.
Oh,
At the
sorry.
intersection.
Okay, well, I just misunderstood, but it didn't make sense to me. Why would you put stop signs on Old North Road? They need to be others. Now, there's also a traffic 25 zone on Old North Road. It's at the curve, near the S curve down. Cars can't even see it when you come around the curve. And then they take off like they're gonna be climbing a mountain. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Come on up, sir.
Ray Costa.
My question is, can it be made so that Old North Road is done first before this is approved? So that you're not digging up Old North Road to get all these other things done? At least if the Old North Road is completed, then you can go into this new section. But the way it is now, is you're going to have all this heavy equipment coming in, trucks, into the Old North Road area. So if it could be contingent with Old North Road being completed, then that'd be a better, to me, it would be better.
I don't know what you mean by Old North Road being completed. You mean
One of those was the improvements.
improved? I don't know if we could answer that question.
Well, I mean,
I
this
live
is,
on Calvintown Road. I mean, the developments that have come up on Calvintown
Yeah.
Road, I feel for you, but I don't know what the town has
well,
plans to.
the problem is once you get that plat done, if the road is the same as what it is now, it's gonna be crazy.
It's up
There's
to the
some
town. It's up to the
curves.
town to do Old North Road. This developer and this board has no jurisdiction over that. You'd have to have your town councilman, the public works director appropriate money to update Old North Road. We don't have any
In
authority.
each
No, but
district,
I mean, this
believe
is something that I'm asking, whether it would be better to do it that way.
Well, if the town doesn't have plans to do it in the foreseeable future, we can't stop these folks
And
from
who
using
do
their
we
property.
see about that?
Go to your town councilman.
That's about it.
Well, to start.
Because I would think that to have that road completed would be a lot better, because there's gonna be a lot more traffic just in building the new houses.
I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else that has any questions that haven't been answered tonight? Okay, anybody else? Nobody. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to close public hearing.
Motion to close public hearing.
I second.
Motion by Mr. Mattson, seconded by Mr. Lukowitz. Any discussion before I close it? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, public hearing has been closed. Can we take a 5-minute break before we continue? You're welcome. Okay, we're ready to proceed.
You need a sergeant in arms.
Okay, so we heard a lot of testimony tonight. Anybody on the board have any questions?
Mr. Chair, I have a question for Mr. Cato. I'm just curious, the swales that you said the swale's gonna channel some of that water. I think that runs from, really? That's gonna run from, I don't know, north to south. It's gonna basically be the properties that are border the properties on Old North Road. Is that correct, the swale you're talking about?
Yeah, it's to prevent water from going onto those properties. That's where it's
Yeah.
located, yes.
So when you do that, is that a town's property, or the people own that part of the swale? Is that managed?
There's we proposed a deed restriction on that land. So it's owned by as proposed. It'll be owned by, and feel free to jump in, but it'll be owned by the homeowner, the person who owns the lot, the proposed lot, but they'll be prevented from grading and putting improvements back there, pools, sheds, to impede the stormwater flow. So once it's constructed and seeded, they can still utilize it. They'd have to maintain it, and they can't put something there that will make it not function the way it was intended.
Okay. Just another thought. I don't know. Before this neighborhood even was thought of, it seems Old North Road, people need to slow down. It seems like just a big traffic problem. If anyone in the audience wanted to go about suggesting some might want a stop sign on Old North Road, especially where we're kind of creating now a four-way. So these have been successful on Reservoir Road, up by Clubhouse Road, even one in Wood Estates, Wisteria. People do stop, 95% of the people will stop. It will slow the chaos down. If they wanted to, get the ball rolling on that, would they go through their town council? If they wanted to, would they go to the?
I'll handle this one. We have a traffic subcommittee that, in town, that consists of myself, the town engineer, the public works director, the colonel, the major, and the sergeant from the police department. And we meet usually quarterly, or anytime there's something that comes before us, traffic related. So they would put a request into the police department, and we would bring it up at our next meeting. So that's how that would get done.
Oh, so any requests like that?
Any
Police
request
department.
relating to stop signs, speed bumps, traffic-related items, we have a committee, there's about 6 of us, and we meet and discuss them.
But the first step for anyone, including myself, would just be you go to the police station.
Correct.
With something
Oh,
to
you
say,
don't
hey,
have to go down there physically, you could call the major and
just let them know.
speak with
I'd
him.
like this on an agenda.
Yes.
Okay.
And they've been very successful on Station Street. Very successful.
Yep. And Jervis at
Yeah, I know the one you're talking about.
near the school, and Black Rock at
Yes.
Long Beach,
Yes.
and Country View.
And I'm a
So-
huge fan of the ones on
Yeah.
Reservoir and Clubhouse
Me
myself.
too.
Yeah,
They
so,
work.
So there are avenues, pardon the pun, to slow folks down by making that perhaps a four-way stop, but it would not be up to these folks to do that. That would be up to someone to bring that. And I actually was
Absolutely.
going to bring up the same thing.
Any other questions from the board?
I'll let anyone else go, but then I have one.
Go ahead, Rick.
No, mine was covered.
I just want to kind of, because I heard this, and I don't know, I'll leave it up to the homeowners that spoke that are going to be abutting the access. And I believe both of them have detention basins, is that correct, to the rear of their property?
Yes.
And there was not enough room for any landscape buffer, and you're proposing solid fencing of some sort.
Correct.
And I don't know who is going to be responsible for maintaining that, and I don't know if those homeowners are going to have a choice. I know one of the individuals, I think it was Mr. Kalenda, said he was interested, or I think it was the last gentleman that spoke after him. What was his view going to look like after the project was built? And I know there was talk about what the roadway would look like and that the detention basin was going. There was no mention of what type of fence, and I also was wondering if they had ample space in their backyard and wanted a landscape buffer, if that was something that the developer would be amenable to would be to perhaps planting some arborvitaes or something along the property line on their side, since there wasn't enough. Totally up to them, but I'm just throwing that out there. I think it was the gentleman with the baseball cap and the one with the green tie. And I'm just throwing that out there. I know you didn't ask for it, but if that's something, you can't come up, public hearings closed, but certainly after, if that was something that would be beneficial, that, maybe they would consider that an option if, because I don't know what type of solid fencing and who's going to maintain it. I'm not a big fan of, for example, the white vinyl plastic fence is supposed to last. They blow down in windstorms and then they crack. And myself, I prefer chain link fence with a landscape planting versus any type of solid fence that's going to require maintenance. But that's my personal preference, and it was just a comment. That and the four-way stop, which Mr. Anderson already brought up.
Anybody else on the board?
Mr. Chair, I have one more
Sure,
discussion
go
point. So they also alluded to, the maintenance of these retention ponds, and we didn't give a really clear answer as far as how, when, and who does the inspection of the sand filters, and if they wanted to find out the town's business practice, right, and if they're on schedule and what they actually do and when is it, how often do we do this? If they wanted to get these answers, they would go to the Department of Public Works, and is that where they would get these answers? Because it seems like they got viable threats with the triple E's. They're no joke anymore, and just the maintenance alone. So are they up to date, right? When's the last time this one was looked at? So if they wanted these answers, they would go to the Department of Public Works directly, I'm assuming. And can we give them the direction here if they really want to know?
Mr. Chairman, can I address that?
Absolutely. Come on up.
So, the maintenance plan has been submitted. It's available in the planning office if they want to educate themselves on what the maintenance plan is.
Yeah.
That would be in the planning office. How it'll be accomplished, DPW.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I will make a motion for a favorable approval for preliminary plan approval for Assessors Plat 24, lots 26 and 31 in the R20 zone, consisting of approximately 12.18 acres of vacant land for a 17-lot residential subdivision. In that, the proposed development is generally consistent with the town's comprehensive community plan and satisfactorily address the issues where there may be inconsistencies. The applicants plan to construct 17 single-family homes on lot sizes ranging from 20,000 to 25,000 square feet, meet the density requirements set forth in the land use plan of the town of Coventry's comprehensive plan. The project has been carefully reviewed to ensure that all state and town standards are met relative to maintaining environmental quality, overall public health, and safety as set forth in the visions, goals, and objectives section of the Town of Coventry Comprehensive Community Plan. The proposed project is generally in compliance with the standards and provisions of the town's zoning and subdivision regulations. The project meets the requirements for single-family home development within the R20 residential district. The applicant will not need to ask for any dimensional variances from the Zoning Board of Review. There does not appear to be any negative impact on the health, welfare, or safety of the current or future residents, in that the project will be accessed by a single access point into Old North Road. The project has secured permits from DEM, or do you still have some to go?
We have secured the permits from DEM, but we've made changes in concert with the discussions with engineering, and we're just going to make sure that DEM has the same file that engineering has.
All right, so I'll leave that in. The project will still need to secure revised permits from RIDEM, or permits from DEM based on the revised submission. The project will be served by public water and public sewer. Several stormwater treatment and control areas are proposed. Proposed rooftop runoff chambers are proposed for the project. The project will secure all necessary town permits, including but not limited to soil erosion and sedimentation control permit. The subdivision as proposed will not result in the creation of individual lots with any physical constraints to development that building on those lots according to pertinent regulations and building standards would make impractical. There is adequate access to public roadways. The requested waivers are generally reasonable, and local concerns that may be affected by the requested relief do not adversely affect the public. The stipulations set forth in this approval are as follows. There'll be a compost silt sock sediment control barrier with a minimum of 12 inches in diameter. Compost silt sock sediment control barrier shall be backed with silt fence along the limit of disturbance abutting lots 5, 6, 17, 18, and 19 on Assessors Plat 24. Compost silt sock sediment control barrier shall be backed with silt fence along the limit of disturbance abutting lots 32 on Assessors Plat 24 and lot 140 on Assessors Plat 32. The developer applicant shall clean and remove all woody growth from Sweet Fern Lane. No, we're gonna scratch that one, right? That one's off. The developer, let's see, a line of silt sock sediment control barrier shall be placed across the construction entrance during all non-working hours. A road opening permit from the Coventry Department of Public Works is required for all work within Old North Road and Sweet Fern Lane as may be necessary for water and sewer. Temporary increases in runoff from the site during construction are not allowed. After placement of the roadway's binder course layer of pavement and prior to placing the surface course layer of pavement, the applicant developer must employ temporary runoff controls to ensure stormwater runoff from the roadway is directed into the roadway's catch basins and stormwater basins. The project's stormwater basins and drainage systems shall be cleaned by the developer applicant prior to requesting final inspection from the town of Coventry. Coventry Department of Public Works and/or town engineer can direct the developer applicant to install additional erosion and sediment controls during construction. All costs to install these additional erosion and sedimentation controls shall be paid for by the developer applicant. The developer applicant is required to sweep Old North Road and Sweet Fern Lane as needed or as directed by the Coventry Department of Public Works or town engineer to remove any accumulated sediments and debris that may accumulate. The applicant shall obtain a revised approval from RIDEM based upon the proposed modifications that were agreed to between the town engineer's office and project engineers, which I already covered. Any proposed approvals that the board seems fit to put forth, including the stipulation conditional approval. So were there any other stipulations? I believe, let's see. Okay, we've got 6 waivers, I think, right? We've got one waiver for the 2% of additional volume.
That's correct.
The reduction of the roadway width from 30 feet to 26. Sidewalks only on one side of the roadway. Is that the entire development?
Excuse me, that, we were removing the sidewalk on one side.
Okay.
That did appear at master plan.
Okay, removal of the sidewalk on one side of the length of the roadway, removal of the improvements to the proposed stub road entitled New Road B that'll still be platted but left unimproved, an increase in the maximum allowable length of the cul-de-sac and the allowance of a cul-de-sac in the major land development. And I would like to incorporate the planning director's report into the motion to approve and final administratively on this one. It's up to us, but I'm asking, was that part of your request or do you need to come back for final?
I think the only really open item is the DEM adoption of the changes of the town engineer. Other than that, so I think administratively.
I'll leave it in there for now, and if it comes up in discussion, maybe we'll have to take it out.
Okay.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Colonian. Do I have a second?
I second.
Second by Ms. Lukowitz. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Okay, any planning department updates or discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
Better be good.
It'll be brief and good. No, I don't know if you saw in the emails that been going out, I was no longer interim director, they now say director.
Congratulations.
So I just wanted to let you know about that, thank you. The other thing was, I spoke with the chairman prior to the meeting, and now I'd like to speak to the rest of the members about this. I wanted to see if we could hold a special meeting sometime next. There's some stuff that has to get taken care of that's time sensitive. It would only be a quick 10 to 15 minute meeting. Didn't have to be on Wednesday. If we could all try to, agree on a day, I don't know if it's possible. I'm just looking for some help in this matter here. Mr. Clooney, and you look like you have something to say.
Well, I just want to let you know, and I did let the chairman know I'll be on vacation next week, so.
Congratulations.
That's what I said.
He's going, let me guess, Florida. Wow, okay.
Meadow Beach.
Myrtle Beach. Good for you.
The anniversary, but I'm not going to announce it on TV.
That's fine. Okay. Can the other members, could you guys do that? What, do you want to shoot for Wednesday? If this isn't available, we can do it across the street. But if Wednesday doesn't work, we can try to work out another day.
We can do it across the street.
We can, but I'm just trying to pick a day.
Next Tuesday.
Do you want to do Tuesday?
Tuesday's go with me.
All right, let's shoot for Tuesday. If I do it Tuesday, I would have to advertise tomorrow. So, okay, I'm going to shoot for Tuesday. I'll find out if the council chambers are available. If not, we could just do it over across the street.
Same time? Can we do it early?
6:30.
6:30.
Now, Mr. Flynn, I do have one question. You had asked if we could you wanted some discussion about signage in the aesthetic zoning ordinance. I could put it on for discussion purposes only, or we could wait till a regular meeting.
I'd rather do it on a small meeting, like next week, if it's okay with the board. I don't think it will take too long. I just want the planning department to have a little bit of wiggle room on the side ordinance, so.
All right.
The people are not coming in front of us,
So
like Mr. Joy.
we can talk about that. I believe that that's an aesthetic zoning ordinance. I'm not sure if if it needs town council adoption. I'm not sure yet. I'll have to look into that, see how that was approved. Right.
We'd just be adding some language to it.
But again,
And certainly even a recommendation from the planning commission.
I was just gonna go for discussion at this point in time.
Yeah, that's fine.
Let's just.
I just wanted to put it on to just start some open dialogue. I wasn't ready to bring it to a vote yet, if that's okay with the board.
Yeah.
Okay. So, thank you very much.
The 26th.
Is that the day, the 26th?
29th.
Okay, 29th. Okay. 6:30. I will say, I'll let you know, and I'll let you know where the venue's gonna be, whether it's gonna be here, across the street, I'm not sure.
I have one more question. You're finished.
I am finished.
Director. I think you got an email today, and I wasn't quite sure what it was about.
Was it from myself?
No, Gail, Hill Farm Camp Road, admin subdivision. I received 1 Mylar, 2 sets of plans and certification. Please first review. Russell has the file.
That should not have went to you. I don't know why it went to you. Because that's
Somebody
an,
gave it to me from Gail too, but I didn't have a chance to read it.
that's an administrative subdivision. It won't be coming before the board.
That's what I thought, because I remember.
But if you'd like to come look at it, you're more than welcome. I'll have it out on the counter available for you to look at. And I'll talk to Gail about that tomorrow.
Wonderful. I'll be in first thing in the morning.
Okay. I'll have the coffee and donuts ready.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned.
Motion to adjourn. Mr. Mattson, second by Mr. Anderson, all in favor? Aye. Okay.
Richard, also over there?